Hello guys. Tonight, we're stepping softly into the quiet corners of 18th century Paris. Not the Paris of wide boulevards and camera flashes, but one of flickering oil lamps, the scent of roasted beans in the air, and the warm murmur of voices behind thick cafe windows. Tonight, you will be there, and you won't just see it, you'll feel it, as if you belonged. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Leave a comment with your city or village and the hour. I truly enjoy imagining how this story floats gently through all the corners of the world. Now, take a slow, steady breath. Nestle yourself into a soft blanket. Let your head sink comfortably into your pillow. The world will wait for you. Right now, just be here, with me. You're safe, you're calm, and you're about to time travel. Let's begin. It is the year 1767, and you're walking. Your shoes, made of soft leather, worn smooth by time, make gentle taps against cobbled stone. A light mist hovers over the Rue Saint-André-des-Arts, drifting like the breath of the Seine itself. You draw your cloak tighter around you, not because it's cold, but because the city is tenderly waking from dusk into evening, and in this hour, everything slows down. The city smells of stone and rain and something else, warm and inviting. Coffee. This scent has grown more common in recent years. It used to be exotic, found only in apothecaries and private salons. Now, in places like the Café Procope, it weaves into the very spirit of the Parisian night. You aren't in a rush. No one is, at this hour. A pair of women ahead of you walk arm in arm, skirts rustling like silk leaves. A boy darts by with a rolled-up gazette, the ink still wet enough to smear. On a nearby balcony, a lamp glows through lace curtains. Paris doesn't roar, it murmurs. You've lived here long enough to know the rhythm. The city breathes like a creature in sleep, steady, dreamlike, alive with thoughts just beneath the surface. And right now, its thoughts gather not in royal halls or in busy marketplaces, but in cafes. You've chosen a special one tonight. Nestled between a print shop and a bookbinder's atelier, just off the Rue de l'Ancienne Comédie, stands the Café Procope, the oldest in Paris, they say, founded back in 1686 by an ambitious Sicilian named Procopio Coutot. It began humbly, with sorbet and sweet wines, but soon became the crucible for something far more intoxicating. Ideas. You know this place. You've been here before, though not often, not because you weren't allowed, but because each visit feels like entering a different world, one where men speak not of harvests or taxes, but of liberty and fate, of Rousseau and Voltaire, a world where even the silence feels intelligent. The door creaks as you enter, the hinges always slow, respectful, as if they too know the weight of what lies inside. And you're greeted not by a person, but by warmth. A wash of golden candlelight spills over the wooden floorboards. The air hums gently with conversation. Not loud, never loud, just the overlapping of thoughts turned into words, woven like a tapestry of reason and passion. The tables are small and round, their edges worn smooth by decades of elbows and ink. Some patrons read, some argue softly, a few simply sit and sip, their eyes distant, perhaps seeing the future, or some memory too sweet to forget. You choose a seat by the window. It faces a courtyard overgrown with ivy. A lone lamp swings gently in the breeze, making the leaves glitter like stars against the stone. You rest your hands on the tabletop, its grainy texture comforting beneath your fingers. A young server, no older than 16, arrives without needing to ask. He remembers you. You nod politely, and he disappears again, understanding. You hear your name spoken, or at least you think you do. It might be a coincidence. Names echo strangely in places like this where minds move quicker than mouths. On the far side of the room, a gentleman scribbles something furiously in a leather-bound notebook. Beside him, a woman recites lines from a play in a voice just above a whisper. Two men, both powdered and proud, debate taxation with the tenacity of chess masters, and beneath it all the smell of roasted coffee beans still clinging to the air like perfume. Your cup arrives. It is not porcelain. No, it is earthenware, modest, with a small chip on the rim, but inside is the dark, rich liquid you came for. Bitter. Honest. Slightly smoky. a drink that asks nothing of you except your presence. You take a sip, and for a moment, a long luxurious moment, you're not a tailor or a scholar, not a Parisian or a provincial. You're simply someone at the centre of something quietly magnificent. Here, revolutions begin with whispers. Here, the Age of Enlightenment is not just an idea, it is a scent, a flavour, a conversation unfolding over coffee. Outside, Paris exhales, and you, for now, belong completely. The door behind you shuts with a gentle sigh, as if sealing you into another world, warmer, slower, softly lit and heavy with memory. The hum of the café surrounds you like a blanket woven from every conversation ever whispered here. You can almost hear the echoes, old arguments, flirtations, philosophies, and laughter, always a little laughter. Your fingers wrap loosely around the coffee cup. It's warm now, but not hot. The scent still rises, faint and bittersweet, with notes of toasted walnut and a trace of clove. It's different from the sugary blends served at street stalls. This is the true Parisian cup, strong, defiant, and meant to be savoured slowly. Like a good question. You lean back into your wooden chair. It creaks a little, as it always does. The chairs here are sturdy but worn, with curved backs and short legs that keep you close to the table, close to the talk. Around you, the café pulses quietly. It's not a performance. It's a living current. On the wall to your left, a framed letter hangs beneath glass, the ink brown with age. Some say it was written by Voltaire himself, who drank over 40 cups of coffee a day, mixed with chocolate and thoughts sharper than knives. Others say that's a romantic tale, but here in the Procope, truth often wears the clothes of myth, and no one minds. The candle at your table flickers, the wax has pooled into a little basin at the base, catching the light like amber. Your spoon lies untouched on its saucer. There's no need to stir. Everything has settled. Behind you, a pair of students from the Collège de France discuss the soul. One quoting Plato, the other dismissing him with a smirk. They're young, yet their French is formal, their collars stiff. Their hands wave occasionally, not in anger, but in rhythm with their minds. Each word they speak sounds practiced, like something they rehearsed. Walking here. You smile faintly. You remember that age, that hunger for ideas. A soft rustling at the next table draws your eye. There, a woman in a pale blue dress, not expensive but clean, opens a satchel and draws out a play manuscript. She reads silently, lips just barely moving. Her face is thoughtful. She's not here for the company, it seems. She's here because she must read something in the right kind of place. And in 1767, few places are more right than this one. A waiter passes you. Not the young one who brought your cup, but an older man, stooped a little, eyes intelligent. His waistcoat is tidy, though faded at the seams. He balances a wooden tray with ease, 3 cups and a single absinthe glass resting on top. Without looking, he dodges a stray elbow, a stretching boot. He knows this place like a ship's captain knows the sea, and he moves like one. The tray lands gracefully at a nearby table, where a physician, a poet, and a former soldier sit in a triangle of thought. You know these types. The physician will speak of anatomy, but somehow make it sound like poetry. The poet will counter with metaphors too wild to hold water, and the soldier will mostly listen. But when he speaks, it will be with a certainty no university could teach. That is what the Procope offers. Not just caffeine, not just quiet, but the alchemy of ideas. Each table a crucible, each guest an ingredient, unpredictable but essential. The walls are covered in red damask, dulled slightly by smoke and time. Gilded mirrors hang like watchful eyes, reflecting not just the room but the mood. You catch your own reflection in one, blurred, candlelit. You look older, perhaps, than you feel, or maybe younger. In the Procope, time softens. Everyone here exists a little out of step with the world outside. And oh, that world outside. You glance toward the window again. Rain has begun to fall, not hard but steady, softening the edges of everything. Through the glass, the courtyard looks like a painting, shadows and silhouettes behind sheets of silver. The city's roar is muffled here. You can hear only the drip of water and the deep hush of waiting, because that's what this café is, a place of waiting, for answers, for rebellion, for letters, for truth still forming. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep but to feel, to hold this hour still. Your hand still cradles the coffee cup. It's grown cool now, but you don't mind. All around you, Paris thinks, and you are part of it. Your fingertips trace the edge of the empty cup, cool now, dry around the rim. You glance down at the last dark ring it left, a perfect eclipse of bitter, oil-dark residue against the saucer, the kind of thing most would miss. But here, even the stains speak. Coffee. So simple, really. A roasted seed soaked in hot water. But to 18th century Paris, it is so much more. The lifeblood of conversation, the unspoken patron of philosophy, the quiet spark in the tinderbox of revolution. You look up. Your gaze settles on the far corner of the café, where an older gentleman, clearly foreign, holds his tiny demitasse like a relic. He drinks it slowly, eyes half-lidded. His powdered wig is slightly askew, suggesting either poverty or purpose. Perhaps both. He seems to be remembering something. Coffee often does that. Opens the door to memory. But where did it come from? How did this strange, bitter drink, once sipped in whispers, become the voice of an age? You cast your mind back. Not far. Just a few decades. Paris. Early 1700s. Coffee had only recently arrived in France, carried on the backs of traders and diplomats, taken first by the elite as medicine, then by the curious as indulgence. The Ottoman Empire was the original master of this drink, serving it thick and sweet in bustling Istanbul. In Paris, it was first offered in places like the Jardin du Roi during public botanical lectures, still treated with suspicion, still seen as foreign, but it did not stay foreign for long. By mid-century, coffee had become French, or at least Parisian. It moved from salons to the streets, from the rich to the rising middle, and from noble refinement to radical fuel. It was the drink of thinkers. Wine dulled the senses, chocolate was expensive, tea, too British, but coffee sharpened the mind. It clarified, it focused, it made arguments precise, thoughts rapid, and tongues unafraid. It was no accident that the men and women who plotted revolutions, rewrote constitutions, and challenged kings did so with coffee stains on their cuffs. You take a breath and imagine your own first cup. Not here in the Procope. No, that came later. But some small stall, perhaps. A tin pot boiling over coals. The merchant pouring the dark brew into tiny bowls with steady hands. You'd tasted it hesitantly. It was unlike anything you'd known. Bitter, earthy, mysterious. But it stayed with you. That's the thing about coffee in this time. It was never just about taste. It was about place, ritual, and what happened after the cup was drained. What you said. Who you met. What you dared to think. In the Procope, this truth is everywhere. It hums in the floorboards. It clings to the walls. Even now, as you sit quietly, the drink you finished half an hour ago still lives within your mind, your thoughts clearer, more awake, but not restless. There's a certain calm that only true focus brings. A man across the room waves to the waiter, lifting 2 fingers and pointing to the hearth. He'll be drinking Turkish style, perhaps. Thick, spiced, with the grounds left at the bottom like silt. Another patron prefers his à la Parisienne. Thin, filtered, with sugar and a touch of milk. Both options are new to this world. Both are valid. There's no orthodoxy here, only preference. And then, of course, there's le café noir, unadorned, strong, served in those small brown cups that seem to stain the lips slightly. The kind of coffee that Voltaire and Diderot would drink as they crafted arguments that shook monarchies. You think of Voltaire often in this place. He practically haunted it in his final years, sharp-tongued, fire-eyed, never without a cup in hand. They say he consumed 50 daily, sometimes more. Some called him mad, others brilliant. But everyone agreed. His words never softened, and neither did his drink. You glance toward the shelf above the bar. A porcelain bowl sits there, cracked but whole, the kind used to brew in earlier days. Next to it, a silver pot, shaped like a pear, blackened from years of use. These aren't decorations, they're artifacts of thought. Outside, the rain continues, steady and soft. Paris is drinking too, the streets soaking slowly, patiently like pages in ink. The sound is gentle, hypnotic. rhythmic enough to slow the heart without dulling the mind. You draw your cloak tighter and close your eyes again, if only for a breath. The air smells of wax, wood, damp coats and roasted beans. You're not alone, not truly. You're surrounded by others who came here seeking something. Stimulation, comfort, inspiration, maybe even escape. A fresh cup is placed beside you, unasked. The waiter gives a nod, brief but familiar. A gift, perhaps, or a recognition. He knows, as you do, that here in the Procope a second cup is not just indulgence. It is permission to stay longer, to think deeper, to listen more closely to the heartbeat of a world slowly awakening. The second cup rests before you, still steaming. You cradle it, but don't sip yet. The warmth is enough. You let it rest against your palms as you listen, not to one voice, but many. For this cafe is not a quiet one, not in spirit. Though no one shouts or claps, and no music breaks the air, it is full, overflowing even, with speech, not noise, never noise, but talk, considered, deliberate, persistent. A cafe in 1767 is not simply where you drink, it is where you're seen, and being seen matters, especially here, especially now. At the table nearest the fireplace sits a group you've seen before, all men today, though not always. One of them, a round-faced fellow with ink on his fingers, leans forward, explaining something with both hands raised like he's holding up invisible walls. He's a pamphleteer, you think, one of the many, a man who writes quickly and prints cheaply, sending ideas into the streets faster than the censors can blink. You suspect he's read Rousseau but quotes Diderot, and always loudly. Beside him is a man with the look of an aristocrat, or perhaps someone playing one. His coat is elegant but not new. His posture is perfect, but forced. He listens carefully, but his eyes flick toward other tables, other faces. You've seen men like him before. Spies, or informants, or simply men too curious for their own good. In the Procope, it's often hard to tell where curiosity ends and treason begins. You shift in your seat, not from discomfort, but awareness. You've been here long enough to know the roles, the masks. In the corner sits a woman in mourning black, reading quietly. The page she holds is yellowed at the edges. A poem, perhaps, or a draft of something personal. She's been coming for weeks, always alone, always at that same table. Some say she was once a playwright's muse. Others say she writes now under a man's name. No one knows for sure, and she does not speak to those who ask. Toward the centre, a man with a limp and a weather-beaten face recites lines in Latin, drawing mild applause from a boyish pair seated across from him. You don't recognise the man, but his face bears the mark of distant campaigns. Eyes sunken but clear, voice slow but steady. Perhaps he fought under Louis XV. Perhaps he merely likes the idea. A student behind you drops a quill. The ink splatters, and his friend winces, but the older patrons barely look up. Accidents are part of this place. Mistakes are allowed, as long as you think clearly afterward. You sip. The coffee is cooler now and smoother, less of a shock, more of a balm. It grounds you, even as the thoughts around you lift and swirl. It's worth remembering that here, in the 1760s, ideas are dangerous, not metaphorically, literally. The wrong phrase, the wrong friend, the wrong book could see you questioned, arrested, or simply disappeared into the silent grip of authority. And yet here they are, these poets and philosophers and curious minds speaking boldly, earnestly, as if truth had its own kind of armour. Some carry notebooks, bound in soft leather, or simply stitched parchment folded neatly into coat pockets. Some write under aliases, some read their words aloud, some whisper them into waiting ears, and others, the best perhaps, listen. Always listen first. At the far wall, near a portrait of Molière, cracked and shadowed, a tall, thin man stands reading aloud from a pamphlet. His voice is soft, almost cautious, but the room hushes to hear him. It's something new. He speaks of the rights of man, of liberty rooted in reason, and you can almost feel the air tighten, not with tension, but with readiness. A few nod, a few glance toward the door. One man stirs his coffee with such force you expect the cup to crack, and then it passes. The reader bows his head. The room breathes again, the candles flicker, the coffee flows, the conversation shifts back to weather, to poetry, to dresses, to taxes. but something was said, and it remains. You glance out the window once more. The rain is lighter now, but steady. A woman crosses the courtyard, shawl over her head, boots splashing in puddles. She does not look up, but you wonder, what might she be thinking? What might she know? The truth is, the cafe is not only for thinkers, it is also for watchers, those who listen more than they speak, who observe more than they act, and you, at least tonight, are one of them. You sip again. The cup is nearly empty, but around you the Procope is still full. The cafe is quieter now, not silent, but softened, like the last hour before sleep, when the mind begins to fold in on itself. Even the servers move slower, their footsteps deliberate, their trays lighter. It is the calmest hour, and yet, in some way, the most alive. You set down your cup. The second one has gone cold, untouched for the last few minutes. You hadn't noticed. Your attention has wandered to a different warmth, the kind that flickers not from a candle but from an idea. Revolution. You don't say the word aloud. No one does. Not here. Not yet. But it's present. Not in banners or weapons. Not the revolution that comes with musket fire and barricades. No, what's here is subtler, quieter. The revolution that begins in language. It's in the way people talk, the way they question, the way they pause between sentences, as if weighing each word against an invisible scale of truth. You've heard it all evening now that you think of it. A shift in tone, a boldness creeping in. Someone dares to say, "the king," without reverence. Someone else questions the church's claim to charity. A third wonders aloud if taxes should fall more heavily on the shoulders that can bear them. They speak in layers, carefully, like poets, but they are heard. That's all it takes here. And the Procope, this little cafe tucked in the folds of Paris, is becoming something more than a gathering place. It is becoming a witness, a kind of living diary, absorbing every murmur, every ink blot and sidelong glance. At the large round table by the mirror, a young man leans forward. His voice is low, almost musical. He's quoting Rousseau, but not the parts that talk about gardens and music. He's quoting the parts about chains. He says, "Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in fetters." His friends nod, some with enthusiasm, some with hesitation, but none disagree. You recognize the quote. Everyone here does. That's the thing. These are no longer obscure texts read only by aristocrats and scholars. They've moved into the cafes, onto lips, into ink-stained papers passed hand to hand. They're portable now. Even the illiterate know parts of them by sound. Servants carry the words home. Vendors repeat them over boiling pots. Even the street children hear them sung in rhymed couplets by drunk poets by the riverbanks. The city is beginning to think out loud, and cafes like this, warm, dim, filled with thinkers and watchers and in-betweeners, are where that thinking begins. You glance again at the woman in morning black. She's put down her paper now. Her hands rest flat on the table, one thumb gently stroking the edge of her shawl. She's listening, very carefully, to the man quoting Rousseau. She isn't nodding or smiling or writing anything down, but you can tell she hears him, deeply. A waiter clears the table beside you. A chipped plate, 2 cups, and a pile of crumbs vanish into the dark folds of his tray. He moves on without a word, but the scent of roasted beans follows him like a shadow. You breathe in, then let it out slowly. You wonder, will anyone here remember this night, this exact hour? Will the man quoting Rousseau look back someday and say, "It started here, in a cafe, while my hands were wrapped around a warm ceramic cup"? Will the woman remember that something inside her shifted, not from rage but from listening? It doesn't matter, not really. What matters is that it's begun. You lean back in your chair, allowing the worn wood to cradle you. The world outside continues. Carriages rattle in the rain, footsteps splash along the Rue de l'Ancienne Comédie, a dog barks once, then is quiet. Paris still lives its surface life, but down here, inside this amber-lit cocoon, the surface is only the stage. The true play is happening now, in whispered Latin and raised brows, and in the long, slow pause between thoughts. It's still too early to call it revolution. No heads have rolled, no kings have fled, no Bastilles have fallen. But somewhere beneath the Procope, beneath its floorboards perhaps, or tucked behind the old red velvet of the benches, a storm is forming. Not one of lightning and thunder, but of conviction, of language, of slow, careful courage. You don't feel afraid, you feel curious, you feel awake. You wouldn't think of it, not at first glance, not in this time, not in this city, where so much of what is seen is decided by what is allowed, and what is allowed is rarely equal. Paris in 1767 is still a place where men carry their voices like weapons, and women, at least in public, are meant to nod softly or not at all. But in cafes, especially this one, the story is different. You sit quietly now, warming your hands on the edge of the table. The second cup has long gone cold, the third has not yet arrived, and in this stillness your eyes drift to the margins of the room, to the women, not many, no, never many, a few here, scattered, but present, watching, listening, occasionally speaking. They sit slightly apart, though not hidden. Their coats are modest, their hair drawn back, their shoes worn but clean. They carry books, small, tightly bound, and they read without performance. No one stares. That's the rule in here. Not because the cafe forbids it, but because dignity does, and they belong. One woman, she must be 40, perhaps 50, wears a russet cloak. Her gloves rest on the table beside a closed volume of Rousseau's Julie. She's watching the young pamphleteers talk about taxes as if they've invented them. She doesn't interrupt, but her brow lifts faintly at their certainties. She's seen more than they have. You can tell. Another sits 2 tables down from you. Younger, late 20s maybe. A translator, you've heard. Works in both French and Italian. She sips slowly from a painted porcelain cup, a gift from someone long gone. She reads from Montesquieu but writes her own thoughts in the margins, pen scratching soft and slow, pausing now and then to glance at the ceiling, as if listening for something unspoken. Then there is the woman in black, still here, still silent, but no longer alone. A man, respectful, distant, has joined her. He doesn't touch her, or even speak loudly, but he listens to her speak in low tones. She's quoting Voltaire now, but with a particular twist. Her voice isn't angry, it is precise, surgical. She's no novice. Perhaps she was once a salonière, before the debts, or the widowhood, or whatever shadow now dresses her. Whatever her past, she is formidable now, not in presence, but in thought, and thought is currency here. It's often said that women were excluded from the political world in this century, that they were muses or ornaments at best, but anyone who's spent a night in this cafe knows better. They shape the air, even when they don't fill it with words. They influence the rhythm of conversation. They listen with their whole presence, and when they do speak, the entire room quiets. You've seen it before. Last week one recited a letter from Madame du Châtelet, not from memory, but with passion that made the paper tremble in her hand. The men listened, not because she demanded it, but because the words were more true than theirs. That's the thing about the women of the cafe. They don't argue for dominance, they simply reveal clarity, a kind of wisdom that doesn't need noise. You glance around the room, a few newer guests have arrived. A merchant and his wife still wrapped in damp coats. They settle near the window sharing a single cup. She speaks first. He listens. A reversal from the street, but not unusual in here. Your third cup is brought. A smaller one this time, with a slight floral scent rising from its surface. A hint of cardamom, maybe. The waiter nods and disappears into the soft noise of the room, and now, a change. One of the younger women, barely 20, stands. She has a scrap of folded paper in hand. She clears her throat. Not loudly, not demanding, and yet the cafe stills. She reads. It is a short piece, a poem of sorts, but sharp, about bread prices and hunger, and the silence of well-fed ministers. Her voice wavers at first, then steadies. Her eyes do not lift from the page, but by the end the silence is complete. Even the fireplace seems to hush. When she finishes, she does not ask for applause. She simply nods once and sits again. A few tap their fingers softly on the table, the cafe's polite form of clapping. No one says her name, but everyone will remember her face. You take a sip. It's warm, laced with something sweet, and behind it, a quiet fire. The women of the Procope do not fill the room, but they guide it. They are its conscience, its rhythm, its future. And you, tonight, are grateful to be among them. There is a scent here that does not come from the kitchen or the hearth or the beans. It floats just above the warmth of the coffee and the wax of the candles. Paper. Ink. Dust disturbed by pages turned and parchment unfolded. At first you didn't notice it, overwhelmed by roasted aromas and the dull perfume of wet wool and damp tobacco, but now it becomes clear. The café breathes in words. You can feel it in your fingertips as you trace the grain of the table, in your eyes as they follow the shifting lines of spines on books stacked near the coat rack, in your lungs as you inhale and realize the air is dense with writing, not just speech. On every table there is some form of paper, letters, pamphlets, folded gazettes, pages of verse, ledgers with half-finished numbers, manuscripts so faint with use their margins have turned to velvet from fingers sliding across them. The man near the window with the velvet cravat has been copying something slowly, carefully into a bound notebook that looks too fine for his otherwise modest appearance. You notice how his fingers stain slightly with the iron gall ink, and how he pauses after every third word, eyes flickering toward the pamphlet he balances on the edge of a sugar bowl. The title is obscured, but the posture tells you all you need. He's not simply reading, he is replicating. For whom, you cannot say. Perhaps for a printer who lives above a tailor's shop and works late into the night, or for a friend in the provinces who cannot risk ordering banned materials through the official post. To your left, a woman smooths out the folds of a newspaper printed just that morning, Le Mercure de France maybe, or Affiche Parisienne. It crackles softly as she creases it, the kind of sound that only fresh ink on coarse linen paper makes. She skims, her mouth slightly open as if the words touch a place just beyond her breath. Now and then she tears a corner to use as a bookmark. Others in the room lean closer to her table, not obviously, but enough that their cups drift toward the edge and their shoulders angle in. They are listening to silence, to pages moving, to the subtle force of information as it enters a mind. The boy at the corner table is drawing again, not with ink but charcoal, his fingers grey up to the wrist. He sketches the patrons, not all of them, just fragments, a nose here, the curve of a teacup, a woman's sleeve, a man's lip caught between thought and speech. His paper is rough, salvage from discarded stock, already creased in the centre. You imagine him later tonight, alone in a garret studio above the Rue de Seine, spreading these sketches on the floor to reassemble the Procope from memory. It will not be accurate, but it will be true, and someone someday might look at those drawings and wonder what it was like to be here when it all was still beginning. A stack of pamphlets lies near the hearth. They were left behind earlier by a man in a green coat who spoke of the finance minister in low, bitter tones. He departed with no more ceremony than a blink, but the pamphlets remain. De la corruption des magistrats, the title reads, printed in cheap ink on poor stock, folded badly, the type uneven. You reach for one but don't pick it up. Not yet. Just seeing it is enough. A man could be questioned for carrying one depending on where and when he was stopped. You notice too how everyone handles paper with care here. Not out of delicacy but out of habit. Pages are turned with fingertips, not full hands. Books are never slammed. Letters are unfolded in small movements, as if to keep the words from leaking out too quickly. There is reverence, yes, but also something else. Paper is dangerous. A man can say anything, but once it is written, it can be used, it can spread, it can be traced. Even the servers know this. One of them, a tall boy with curly hair tied at the nape, collects abandoned notes from the tables when guests leave, not to read them, but to burn them in the back courtyard stove. He does it without fuss. Some cafes collect gossip. This one perhaps collects secrets. A large volume rests on the shelf above the entrance, chained at the corner to a small iron hook. You've seen it before. Encyclopédie, Volume None, Diderot's grand project, passed hand to hand, smuggled, censored, reissued, and now, somehow, quietly shelved above a doorway in a café where lace-gloved women sip black coffee beside wine-stained poets and retired colonels. No one touches it. It's as if the weight of the knowledge inside requires distance. A man 2 tables down opens a leather folio. Inside, sheets of music, notated by hand delicately, with lines of text between the staffs. The words are not lyrics, they are arguments, philosophical footnotes wedged between clefs, a melody about liberty. You think he might be composing something no one will ever hear, but which he must write nonetheless. It is not for performance. It is for permanence. You turn your eyes back to your own table, your own scraps. You've brought nothing, you realise. No paper, no quill, no book. You're the only person here without a visible thought in ink. But that is all right. Not every visitor comes to write. Some come only to remember. And in a place like this, remembering is its own form of inscription. It is not what they say. Not exactly. It's how they don't say it. How they lean forward, lower their voices by the smallest measure. How a certain phrase trails off and is replaced by a look. How fingers trace the rim of a glass while a second set of eyes, from another table, holds just too long on the speaker's mouth. Conversation here is never only what's heard, it is what's meant and what's implied. Even the silence has grammar. At your table, nothing is spoken just now. But at the next, a heated but quiet argument brews over the recent Parlement ruling. Not the King's Parlement, the judicial body, that strange middle ground between power and principle. One of the men, a minor magistrate perhaps, swears softly under his breath. His words are clipped, syllables turn sharp. His companion, an older man with ink on his cuffs and a gentle stoop, listens more than he speaks. But when he does speak, his tone is full of the kind of exhaustion that only comes from having hoped for too long. Across the room, someone laughs. Too loudly for the tone of the hour. Heads turn, but no one corrects him. Instead, the nearby tables shift subtly away, creating space that wasn't there before. The cafe is crowded, yes, but it rearranges itself like water, parting around disruptions and closing again in their wake. The women you noticed earlier have changed positions. The one with the poetry folded in her shawl now sits near the entrance, speaking to a man whose boots suggest military service. Their voices are calm, steady. From time to time, she lays a hand over her notes and slides them slightly toward him, without lifting her eyes from his. Whatever passes between them isn't gossip, it's strategy. Near the window, a trio of young men, students perhaps, discuss the American colonies. Not with admiration, but with interest. Their understanding is limited, filled with second-hand phrases like natural rights and self-governance. But it's not what they know that matters, it's how they know it. They have learned about liberty not from the mouths of tutors or the pages of sanctioned books, but from overheard fragments, from cafe tables, from pamphlets half legible by street lamp. That is the cafe's true curriculum. Your coffee is nearly gone again. This third cup sits mostly untouched now, forgotten as your mind follows the currents around you. No conversation here is innocent. Even the dullest complaint about food prices contains the question behind the question. Why is it this way? Every mention of the crown is weighed for tone, every reference to Versailles softened with a shrug or hardened with a cough, and sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, someone says something they should not. And then the entire cafe pauses, only for a moment, only a heartbeat. You've seen it happen before. A man says a name, one that belongs to a minister or a cousin of a duke. Or worse, he repeats a phrase from a banned book. Despotism masked as order, or the tyranny of structure. The words float briefly, unprotected. A few heads turn, someone frowns, someone else pretends not to have heard, and the speaker, realizing the shape of what he said, lowers his voice and returns to neutral ground. But by then, it's too late. The idea is out, released like heat from a lamp. There are others who notice these moments too. Always a few men sitting alone, without books, without papers, sipping slowly and smiling too little. Their faces are forgettable. That is what makes them dangerous. Their silence is studied, their presence dull enough to be ignored. Some call them spies, some simply watchers. But they are part of the cafe, just as much as the ink and sugar and spoons, and yet even they cannot stop the spread. Because the ideas do not rise up like proclamations. They seep, they thread between words, they hide inside questions about justice and fairness and bread. They live in analogies and parables, in historical comparisons that are barely veiled warnings. Did you hear how the Dutch handled their last monarch? They say in Geneva the ministers live like citizens. The man across from you now, the one you hadn't noticed until this moment, folds a page into thirds and tucks it into his coat. He nods politely. You do the same. It's a quiet nod between strangers, but it means something here. It means you saw. It means you will not speak of it. It means we are both part of whatever this is, even if we do not name it yet. Above your head, the old clock ticks. Not loudly, just enough to be heard if you're listening. Each tick sounds like it could be the last before something changes, and still, the conversations continue. A woman near the back door asks what will happen if the price of flour rises again. Her friend shrugs. The shrug says we'll wait and see. But the question lingers. The question says we cannot wait forever. Outside, the rain has stopped. You hadn't noticed until now. The street beyond the window gleams, black and slick under the gaslight. A cat darts across the stones. Somewhere a shutter claps once against the wall and then is still. Inside, a phrase from earlier returns to your ears. The chains are elegant, but they are chains. Someone said it in passing, but it stayed. Someone else heard it too. That's how it always begins. You push your cup slightly forward, a signal for another. The waiter appears without a word and clears it. All around you, the cafe keeps breathing, speaking, listening, reshaping itself around the pressure of unspoken questions, and you realise this is not just conversation, it is rehearsal. It must be past midnight now, though the clock on the wall has not chimed. No hour announced, no server moves to snuff the candles. The Prokop does not close at a fixed time. It closes when the minds inside it begin to slow, when the ink dries, when the final phrase has landed gently on the table, like the last drop of coffee left in the pot. That moment hasn't come yet, but it draws near. You feel it. There are fewer patrons now. A third of the tables sit empty. Some still hold used cups, forgotten scarves, folded pamphlets left deliberately behind. The servers clear them without haste. The rhythm has changed. It is slower, quieter, more internal. The cafe, for all its shadows and conspiracies and quiet sparks of rebellion, also knows how to rest. It does not command silence, but it suggests it. Like a parent closing a door half shut. You rise, finally. Not out of boredom, and not to leave the atmosphere behind, but because you must. You have spent enough time with this room, for now. The door creaks open, and the outside presses close. The street is almost empty. Not still, but empty in the way only a great city can be, like it's holding its breath just under the surface. The rain has stopped. The air smells of wet iron and soot and lavender from somewhere unseen. The lamps that line the Rue de l'Ancienne Comédie glow with a weak milky orange, softened by the damp. The flame inside each one flickers as you pass, as if bowing to your steps. Your boots tap quietly on the uneven stone, their sound accompanied only by the distant clatter of a late-night cart turning onto the Rue Dauphine. The wheel squeaks, the horse breathes visibly into the cold. You glance back once at the cafe. Through the front window, now fogged at the edges, you can still see some of them. The woman in black has left. The students have slumped over their books. The tall man who copied his pamphlet is now half asleep, head on hand, lips parted slightly as if still mid-thought. A few candles remain, and their golden light spills like honey onto the street. You move forward. Around you, Paris after midnight is no longer a city of sound. It is a city of texture, the gentle give of damp earth beneath stone, the brushing rustle of wind through ivy along a low wall, the faint scurry of rats beneath a shuttered fruit stall. You walk through this silence like a guest in someone else's dream. A woman passes by you in the opposite direction. Her shawl is heavy and her hair uncovered. She does not look at you. She hums softly. An old song, Breton or Norman perhaps, too faint to place. In her hand is a folded paper. You wonder if she's headed to the cafe. Perhaps she'll leave the note there, quietly, on the table with the chipped saucer. Perhaps someone else will find it in the morning and carry it away. Another link in the chain of soft revolutions. You reach the river. The Seine is dark tonight, though not empty. A flat-bottomed boat rests by the embankment, ropes creaking. Across the water, the dome of the Institut de France looms pale, enormous, ghost-like. The city changes after midnight. It forgets its divisions, of wealth, of class, of status. Everything becomes outline and shadow, water and stone, presence and absence. You linger there, watching the reflections. One lamp placed too close to the bank flickers on the river's surface in long gold ribbons. It breaks apart whenever the water stirs. You think of all the words spoken tonight, the theories, the philosophies, the whispered what-ifs. They too ripple outward, broken and reformed as they pass from mouth to mouth, page to page. In the distance, a bell rings once. One of the monasteries maybe, a solitary note to mark the time. Somewhere behind you, further down the rue, another cafe door opens and closes. More footsteps, more conversation. Paris does not sleep in the way small towns do. It shifts, lowers its voice, yes. But even now it watches from its windows, from behind curtains, from the cracks in doorways and the gaps between cobblestones. Even the silence here listens. You walk again, past a shuttered bookstore where a single volume has been left in the window display. You can't make out the title in the dark, but the spine looks familiar. Brown leather with a faint golden band, possibly Montesquieu, possibly nothing at all. Perhaps the shopkeeper left it there as a test. The city often offers these quiet riddles, small invitations to notice what others pass by. Your room is not far now, 3 streets and a narrow stairway, but you are in no rush. The night is cool and the street is yours, shared only with shadows and the soft, constant hush of a world not quite ready to sleep. Behind you, the Café Procope still glows, and all around it, Paris thinks. The key turns slowly in the lock, soft metal on older metal, a sound that echoes more loudly in the night than it ever does by day. The door creaks open and you step inside, into a room not much warmer than the street, though it holds your scent, your books, your breath still lingering in the folds of the air. You close it behind you with the kind of care one only gives to quiet things. The room accepts you back. It does not ask for anything, it simply resumes. The shutters are still open slightly. You left them that way. A narrow strip of night cuts across the wooden floor like a piece of ribbon, interrupted only by the crooked leg of a table and the edge of your writing chair. A breeze slips through the gap, carrying with it the smell of distant firewood and wet stone, and something else now, something harder to name, a residue of thought. Or perhaps it's just the scent of someone else's tobacco, but it feels older than that. You don't light a candle, not yet. You know the room well enough in this blue blackness to move without seeing. Your fingers brush the edge of the writing desk, pass over the pages you left spread there earlier. A letter never finished, the draft of a small essay you no longer believe in, a receipt for ink you don't remember buying. The papers shift slightly under your hand. You hear the dry rustle and know, instinctively, how close the ink is to smudging. You sit. The chair groans the way it always does. One leg is shorter than the others, and so you angle your weight slightly to compensate. It is not comfortable, but it is familiar. Across the room, a small mirror catches what little light enters from the street. It doesn't reflect you exactly, only a glimmer, a suggestion. You see the shape of your shoulder and the blur of your collar, but not your face. There is something about the hour between midnight and dawn that invites thought, but resists clarity. You're not tired, not really, not alert either. You exist in a state of slow drift, ideas half-formed, moments from the cafe still replaying softly inside your skull. The phrase the young woman read aloud, about bread and silence, has lodged itself in the back of your mind like a splinter. You didn't agree with her, or maybe you did. That's not the point. The point is, you heard it, and it stayed. You run your fingers along the edge of the desk, where the wood is smooth from years of use, and try to summon something, not words, not yet, just the shape of something true. Outside, the city exhales again. You hear the faintest clatter of hooves far off, perhaps a courier's horse, or maybe someone returning late from a salon near the Place des Vosges. You imagine the rider hunched forward, cloak pulled tight, thoughts lost in his own quiet turmoil. Paris is full of such journeys. Everyone returning from somewhere where a truth was spoken to openly. Everyone carrying something they didn't have when the night began. You light a single candle. Its glow fills only part of the desk, but that's all you need. The page before you is blank. Not intimidatingly so, just patient. You dip the quill in ink that's begun to thicken at the edges and press it lightly to the page, but you don't write. Not yet. Instead, you listen. To the scrape of a rat behind the wall, to the creak of the sign outside swaying gently with the breeze, to your own breath slowing as your eyes unfocus. This is the space the cafe leaves behind, not silence, not stillness, but resonance. It follows you home like perfume on a coat, like coal dust in the lines of your palm. You carry the night with you, its questions, its half-answered doubts, its flickers of fire in otherwise calm voices. You rest the quill on the inkstand and lean back. Not everything must be written tonight. Not every thought becomes argument. Some simply become presence. The room darkens slightly as a cloud passes over the moon. The candle dances. Outside, somewhere on another floor, someone coughs. A door shuts gently. A rope creaks in a pulley. You look down at the page again, still blank, and yet, somehow, not empty. The day enters not with drama, but with a slow, indifferent certainty. Paris wakes like an old animal, cautiously with effort, limbs stiff from weather and time. The streets outside your window begin to speak again, first in murmurs, then in movement. A wheel on stone. A boy's voice calling out something you don't quite catch. The closing of a gate, the striking of a match. You rise without ceremony. You've not truly slept, not in the usual sense. You drifted perhaps between breath and thought, between the steady dimness of your room and the sharper shadows of the café still alive in your memory. But your limbs are rested enough, and your mind has not yet begun to resist itself. That is enough for now. The street is pale with light. Not golden yet. That comes later. For now, everything wears a veil of grey, interrupted only by the bright red of a fishmonger's cart being dragged along the Rue Mazarine, and the thick white steam rising from bread ovens opening just beyond the corner. The smell wraps around your shoulders like fabric. You walk toward the café. It looks different in daylight. The Procope by morning is not the Procope of candlelit theory and whispered sedition. It belongs to a different class of visitor and a different kind of conversation. The front window, so shadowed and subtle the night before, now gleams faintly, smudged with fingerprints and the dust of early hours. The door is propped ajar. A wet broom leans against the wall just outside, its bristles splayed from recent use. The scent of old grounds and damp ash reaches your nose even before you cross the threshold. Inside, the transformation is gentle but unmistakable. The candles are gone. The coals in the hearth are reduced to dull red pebbles beneath a fine layer of ash. The tables are cleaner, cleared of papers and forgotten books, their surfaces wiped, some still drying. A new set of patrons fills the chairs, less velvet, more linen, men with worn cuffs and boots that still carry dust from roads outside the city, women with baskets, shopkeepers, artisans, clerks. Their shoulders are hunched, but their voices are open, tired but unguarded. The conversation is not about liberty. It is about prices, wheat, salt, the length of the king's last decree and what it didn't mention, a rumour of a new tax on glass, an increase in the cost of soap. Bread. Always bread. The word recurs like a cough, like a habit, like a prayer. Bread is the daily worry, the measure of stability. It tells you more than any printed gazette ever could. You sit at your usual place near the window and no one remarks on it. No one remembers you from the night before. This crowd does not care for philosophers or pamphleteers. Their eyes hold less ambition and more necessity. The waiter who approaches you is different. A boy, perhaps 12, with sleeves too long and a nervous habit of licking his bottom lip. He takes your coin without speaking, nods, and moves on. Across the room, a man in a heavy coat wipes his spoon clean with a square of cloth before stirring his drink. Beside him, a woman unwraps a small parcel of cheese and cuts it into precise cubes with a dull knife. They do not speak to each other, though they clearly arrive together. The café to them is a place of pause, not performance. The Procope has layers, like the city itself. What you saw last night, ideas blooming in the dark, carried in ink and lifted by rhetoric, that is only one face. There is another, older face, more lined and less literary. This morning crowd has no use for revolution, unless it lowers the price of onions. Their minds are sharp, but their thoughts are tethered to earth, not theory. And yet, as you listen more closely, you begin to hear the edges of something else, not the language of philosophers, but the shadows of it. A man speaks of fairness, though he does not use the word justice. A woman complains of her landlord's cruelty, and another mutters something about the law being only for the rich. A third whispers that the baker up the hill has started mixing chalk into the flour. The whispers aren't political, not exactly. but they are friction. That's what revolution feeds on before it has language. The cafe is part of their world, just as much as it is the thinkers. It gives them a space not just to rest, but to exchange. A merchant leans across a table and passes a crumpled note to a neighbour. Likely not a pamphlet, more likely a list, or a record of price changes. But the action is the same. Information moves, quietly, in plain sight. You drink the morning coffee. It is thinner than last night's, slightly overbrewed, still hot enough to burn if taken too quickly. The bitterness is more pronounced, the sweetness absent. But it wakes you. It carries no illusions, just caffeine and heat, and the faint promise that something, somehow, will make today manageable. The door swings open again, a new face enters, young, red-eyed, still blinking from the daylight. Not a worker, not a reader, someone in between. A printer's apprentice, maybe. Ink beneath the nails, tired in that particular way people are when they've been setting letters since midnight. He nods toward the back and slips a folded sheet into the coat pocket of a man already seated. No words exchanged. The cafe is watching. You finish your cup, though you don't remember taking the last few sips. Your eyes fall once more on the far wall, where the mirror still hangs, reflecting not just faces but habits, the same ones, over and over, morning and night, dressed in different clothes, but always tending toward the same question. What comes next? You follow him with your eyes more than your attention at first, the boy who just stepped in with paper in his pocket and soot on his sleeves. Not remarkable in his posture, not elegant, not loud. He's one of hundreds in the city, young, forgettable, shaped like silence. And yet something about the stillness in his movements, the way he keeps his head tilted downward even indoors, gives you pause. He does not behave like a visitor. He behaves like a message being carried. He sits near the back, at a crooked table with a cracked tile floor beneath it, where a small dip in the stone collects dust and echoes. The man he greeted, older, weathered, with hair tied too tightly, accepts the paper without looking up. It vanishes into the sleeve of his coat. They do not speak. The boy takes the chair opposite him and removes his gloves with methodical care, folding them into a square before tucking them under one thigh. The gloves are torn at the fingertips. You see now what gives him away. He doesn't glance around the cafe like a customer would. He doesn't note the pastries behind the glass or stretch his arms as one might when coming in from the cold. He sits in the exact centre of his chair, spine straight, and lets his eyes rest on the space just above the older man's head, as if reading something written there. He's waiting not to be served, but to be summoned. His name is probably not his name. His route, though short, likely changes each time. A different corner turned, a different alley used. Even the paper he carries would be meaningless out of context, only legible to those who already know what they're reading. You've heard of these boys. They come from the basements of printing houses, where presses thump day and night like heavy hearts. They live on crusts and ink fumes, often sleeping in corners under unfinished stacks. They set type with fingers blistered from handling warm metal, burned from hot wax, inked black down to the cuticles. They deliver before dawn. They memorize faces. They speak little, because they know that the wrong phrase spoken to the wrong person can collapse entire conversations that have not yet happened. The older man finally speaks. It's a single word, maybe a name. You can't hear it. The boy nods once. He reaches into his coat and retrieves another folded square. This one's smaller, older, creased so many times the folds are beginning to fray. The man accepts it without thanks. It joins the other inside his coat. Then, without another glance, the boy rises and leaves. No coffee, no seat warmed, no words wasted. The door swings shut behind him, you're left watching the older man. His hand rests over the coat pocket, not protectively but with pressure, a grounding gesture. He does not open the notes. Not yet. Perhaps not here. The cafe, for all its tolerance and murmurings, is not safe. Not entirely. Not always. Even the most radical table holds someone pretending to believe what he hears. The game is constant. The rules change hourly. Trust is fluid. The cost of error is clarity. A server walks by, drops a small receipt on his table. It's blank. He nods, pays, and leaves. Just like that, 2 messages have entered the cafe, passed through it like light through a window, and exited without friction. You realise, again, how much the café has become a corridor. Not a destination, but a point between other places, between page and action, between idea and arrangement, between silence and sentence. There are more like him. Boys and girls, some younger, some so small they're mistaken for servants or street children. They run the thin wires of communication between printers in Montmartre and pamphleteers near the Marais, between the radical booksellers near the Halle au Blé and the secret gatherings behind closed shutters on the left bank. Their routes are never marked on maps, their cargo is never named, but they carry the first tremors of something no army has yet seen. You sit still for a moment, letting your fingers curl slightly against the rim of your cup. The air is warmer now. Someone behind you has begun humming. A dog barks in the distance. Paris opens like a book where the middle chapters have already been underlined and every character walks with one foot in shadow. You wonder how many of them, these boys, these errand runners, these children with paper in their sleeves, will survive the years to come, and how many will vanish into legend or rumour or simply into silence. You finish your cup and leave your coin under the saucer, and when you step back into the street, you can almost see him again. The boy, half a block ahead of you, slipping between carts and stone and sky like someone who belongs to neither morning nor night. It begins with a knock, 3 times, then silence, then once more. Not rhythmic, not theatrical, just deliberate, a signal without artistry. You stand before a narrow door tucked beneath a faded green awning on the Rue des Grands Augustins. The sign above it still reads Librairie Morin, though the paint has peeled so thoroughly it could be mistaken for any other corner shop. The window shows only the front half of the store, proper shelves, dull brown bindings, volumes of sermons, moral guides, royal edicts, a handful of historical essays approved by the Crown, all tidy, all legal, all unread. The knock is answered by a man you've met only twice, and never by name. He wears spectacles that seem slightly too strong, making his eyes appear larger than they are. His coat is grey, clean, but decades out of fashion, and patched at both elbows with a practised hand. He looks past you before looking at you, then he steps aside. You enter. The air changes instantly. It is dry, close, full of paper, and the kind of dust that rises not from disuse but from movement. You walk past the front room without pausing. No one here browses. Browsing is for strangers, for those who have nothing to lose. You move through the curtain that divides the front from the back and then down the stairwell, steep, curved, uneven. Your hand trails the wall as you descend, not to steady yourself, but to feel the deep chill of stone. You count the steps. You always do. 12. Then 13. Then the uneven one. You've never seen this staircase in daylight. You imagine the walls are damp, streaked with lichen, but in the lantern light they are simply dark. The ceiling lowers. You duck instinctively as you reach the cellar, and there it is, the hidden room, not large, not grand, but saturated, floor to ceiling with books, papers, folded pamphlets, sheaves of handwritten manifestos, thick bundles tied with twine. The smell of ink is overwhelming, not fresh ink, the wet, sweet smell of a press still warm, but old ink dried in layers, seeping into the grain of the paper. Dust lies thick in the corners. A single oil lamp hangs from a hook above the central table, which is stained in 4 shades: wine, wax, soot, and something you think might be blood. The bookseller is already there. He doesn't greet you, he simply returns to cataloguing. With hands worn down to quiet gestures, he lifts a small stack of illegal material. De l'esprit des lois, Discours sur l'origine de l'inégalité, Lettres d'Alembert, an unmarked copy of La Religieuse. You recognize the covers by feel more than sight. Each spine bears a slight discoloration, a notch, a thread of twine wound once around the base. Not symbols, not codes, just patterns. Patterns that mean, this one will travel, this one must stay, this one has already been read by 6 people who no longer live here. You move toward the far shelf. Here lie the dangerous ones, the copies with no titles, no authors, the books whose printers are either in hiding or in prison or in history, the ones that argue not with careful nuance but with open, sharp edges. They do not suggest, they declare. They use the word people with force, they use the word freedom without apology. One of them catches your eye. It's old, the edges of the paper browned and slightly curled, but the thread binding remains tight. It carries no markings at all. You open it slowly, careful not to creak the spine. The first sentence isn't a sentence. It's a list. Names, places, sins, a ledger of injustices strung together like a rosary. And then, beneath that, this is not a question. It is a reckoning. You close it gently. Someone will read that soon. You will make sure of it. Across the table, the bookseller begins sorting a pile of thin pages. Proofs, not yet printed. The ink smudges at the corners where his fingers press too hard. The type is inconsistent, clearly handset. You can just make out the title, Observations sur la misère des ouvriers en soie. You think of the boys running between presses, the women you've seen wrapping their fingers in cloth before handling thread, the men with cracked palms and hollow eyes. This essay will not change their world, but it might make someone think that, in this place, is dangerous enough. You place a coin on the table, not for payment, for passage. The bookseller nods, then disappears behind a stack of crates, and returns with a wrapped bundle tied with coarse string. He hands it to you wordlessly. The weight tells you it contains more than paper, perhaps a booklet stitched with wire, perhaps something with a diagram, perhaps just pages so dense with anger they feel heavier than they should. You tuck the bundle inside your coat, against your ribs. It presses there like a second heartbeat. The bookseller extinguishes the lantern. You climb the steps again, slower this time. You can hear the creak of wood above, the front shop returning to its daylight roll, the approved titles, the respectable silence, and then, once more, the street. The sun is higher now, the city louder, but still the same Paris, the same uncertainty behind every polite word, the same possibility under every coat. You disappear into the crowd. No one looks at you. You're simply another person, walking in the open, carrying the invisible. You don't open it immediately. The letter sits untouched on your desk for most of the afternoon, its presence undeniable, though small enough to be covered by the corner of a ledger or swept under a sheaf of notes. The handwriting on the front is unfamiliar. Broad strokes, uneven slant, the ink a little faded at the edges where the damp has crept in. The seal has been broken already, likely by the postmaster or someone paid to inspect it. But it was resealed with care, the crease pressed neatly, and the wax warmed enough to conceal the breach. You pretend not to notice. It arrived with a bundle of dull papers, official proclamations, a delivery invoice for a printer's die, a satirical broadside from someone whose wit no longer keeps up with their anger. But the letter is not satire. It's not official, and it is not from here. The parchment is coarser, paler, from a region where the mills use local pulp instead of city-pressed cotton. You recognise the difference by feel. When you finally unfold it, the page makes a soft cracking sound, the way old bread does when torn. It begins without greeting. There is no preamble, no dear or friend. Just the name of a village you know only by reputation, remote, nestled in the hills south of Lyon, a place where the roads aren't paved and the winters are long. You recall it being mentioned once in a conversation about wool tariffs. You had not expected it to be real. It is. The letter is written by a schoolteacher, or someone like one. Their sentences are clear, direct, the kind of clarity that comes from speaking aloud before committing anything to paper. There is an honesty in it that no Parisian would dare. They speak of fields, of market days, of roads, so poorly maintained the carts break down before reaching the neighbouring town. They write of illness, of shortages, of bread baked thinner each week. But not bitterly. There is no dramatics in the tone, just reporting, as though the truth is indictment enough, and then the letter shifts. They mention a name, someone you do not know, a boy, 16, taken for conscription. His mother walked 3 leagues to protest and was turned away at the mayor's door. No trial, no recourse, just silence. A week later, the mill shut down. The owner's taxes were lowered, but the workers' quotas doubled. Then come the words that do not shout but echo. It is quiet here, but not still. You read the sentence twice, maybe 3 times. It is quiet here, but not still. The phrase stays with you more than the rest. You picture it. The stone houses. The crooked lines of smoke rising from chimneys too few to warm the whole room. The way the people must speak in half phrases, not out of fear, but exhaustion. the way they do not look up when they pass the manor on the hill, the way even their anger has become a kind of routine, and yet something is moving. Beneath the routine, beneath the silence, something unformed, not yet language, not yet law, but the beginnings of attention, the beginning of memory. You look at the final lines, they ask for nothing. No instructions, no money, no reply, only this. If you know others who think as you do, let them know we are awake. We do not yet speak loudly, but we speak. You fold the letter again, carefully, this time along a new crease so the old one will not tear. You place it inside the drawer with the bundle from the cellar, and you lock it, not to hide it, but to protect it. Some things are not meant to travel quickly, some truths must be carried slowly, hand to hand, allowed to settle in the space between sentences. Outside, the light has turned gold again, the kind that makes the edges of things blur, the chimneys, the corners of shutters, the shoes of the man walking briskly across the street. This is the time of day when everything softens. You return to the desk, but your thoughts remain with the village. You picture the teacher. You imagine them writing by firelight, holding the page steady against the uneven surface of a table probably made by someone they know. You wonder if they were afraid, or if they were simply tired of waiting for someone else to begin. The city continues around you, but part of you is now somewhere else. Beyond the Seine, beyond the gaslight, in a valley where nothing is written yet, but everything is being prepared. It begins, as it often does, without announcement. Just the slow opening of the café door, not even loud enough to interrupt the conversation about canal plans taking place near the hearth. A gust of warm air enters behind the figure, stirring the fringe of candlelight and the hem of someone's coat. You notice it first in the change of scent, a faint mix of tobacco and something unfamiliar, resinous, earthy, almost spiced. He's taller than most Parisians, with a coat too fine for a local, and boots too new to have survived the city's alleys. His face is narrow, unlined, but the eyes move with deliberate caution, not fear, not confusion. More like someone mapping the room in real time, placing each voice and silence on an invisible ledger. No one greets him. The Prokop does not offer hospitality to strangers out of politeness. It watches first. He removes his gloves without flourish, and tucks them into a satchel that hangs too low for style, too worn for vanity. He speaks quietly to the server, who tilts his head but does not respond, only gestures to a table near the far window, the one where the light lands faintest in the morning and brightest just before sunset. A chair of moderate importance, neither exposed nor obscured. A place where one can observe and be observed without either becoming a statement. His French is crisp, not perfect, but not hesitant either. The accent is northern, or perhaps Germanic, possibly Swiss. Someone at the far table whispers Hollandaise, but it's more instinct than knowledge. You watch him settle into the chair. He carries no book, no folio, no visible papers, but his coat opens just slightly when he sits, and you glimpse the corner of a sewn leather journal peeking from an inner pocket. The coffee is brought without a word. He takes it with a nod, then lifts the cup, breathes in, not deeply, just enough, and drinks. Not all of it. Not quickly. A single measured sip, as if testing something. Not just the flavour, perhaps the temperature, perhaps the moment. The conversations in the room begin to shift, nothing obvious. A few voices soften. One table steers its talk away from taxation. Another abandons Voltaire entirely in favour of some harmless anecdote about a horse that refused to leave a bakery near Les Halles. But the change is not fear, it's reflex. The same reflex that animals show when they sense a scent not native to the forest. And yet he does nothing threatening. He sits, he drinks, he watches. Eventually he takes out a small pen, a fine pointed thing with a silver nib that catches the candlelight like a coin turning in water. The journal comes next, a modest book, bound in dark green, the leather worn soft around the corners, the kind of softness that speaks of long travel and careful fingers. He writes nothing at first. He just opens to a blank page and lets the pen hover. Then, with almost exaggerated gentleness, he begins to write. The movement is slow, deliberate, more like sketching than writing. His pen rests often. His eyes lift between each sentence, scanning the room, noting posture, sound, who is reading, who is not. He watches the server, counts how long it takes between requests. He glances at the poster nailed crookedly near the bar, something about trade in the colonies. He notices the woman who's been cutting her cheese into tiny pieces since sunrise. He sees the man who always nods but never speaks. You wonder what he is here to find. Some assume he's a spy, others a merchant, but you're not so sure. There's no weight to him, no performance. He isn't observing the cafe with the intent of controlling it or condemning it. He's recording it, gathering it. You remember the letter from the provinces, the same careful clarity, the same absence of decoration. Perhaps this man is part of that same network, or perhaps he is from further away, someplace where the revolution is only rumour, where people still call France a monarchy without irony. Maybe he's come to see whether it's true, that ideas can grow wild here, that even a cup of coffee can tremble with possibility. The coffee's nearly gone now. He scribbles one final line and closes the journal, binding it shut with a simple leather strap. No initials, no seal. He does not leave immediately. He looks out the window. His reflection hovers there, half ghost, half scholar, framed by the sky that has turned colourless in the midday haze. When he finally rises, he leaves 3 coins, slightly more than necessary. A subtle act. Not generosity, not bribery. Perhaps an apology. Perhaps an offering. Perhaps simply his way of saying, I saw this, and I valued it. And then he is gone. The door shuts with a whisper, and the cafe exhales. Conversations resume, though they do not return to what they were. Not entirely. A page has turned, something was added, something recorded, and the room knows it. You sit with this knowledge quietly. It's one thing to speak, it's another to be witnessed. They do not arrive in uniform. That is the first thing everyone notices. There is no trumpet of boots, no royal insignia pinned to a chest, no sword clattering against the doorframe. Instead, the censor enters as if he belongs, wrapped in a drab coat that has not seen polish in years, boots dusty, face unshaven just enough to be forgettable. The only sign is how still he is. Stillness in a place of constant motion is its own form of declaration. You don't notice him until he's already seated, back wall, left side, partially obscured by the hanging velvet drape that marks the edge of the fireplace alcove. A seat no one ever chooses unless they intend to stay unnoticed. But now every regular in the Prokop sees him, even those who pretend not to. He orders tea, not coffee, and he doesn't drink it. It sits untouched in front of him, growing darker by the minute. The steam curls upward, reaching toward the rafters where the morning soot still lingers in faint patterns from last night's fire. He places a small notebook on the table. It stays closed. His hands rest on either side of it, not tense, not relaxed, balanced, waiting. The conversation at the nearby table dies mid-phrase. One of the students shifts in his seat, suddenly unable to remember the second half of his argument about Rousseau. His friend coughs unnecessarily. Their cups rattle faintly on porcelain. They do not resume their talk. The woman with the blue scarf who usually reads by the window gathers her things with a delicacy that suggests she has done this before, leaving not because she must, but because her presence would no longer be useful, a kind of tactical retreat. She does not look at the man. He does not watch her go, but both are aware. You recognize him now. You saw him once at the Hôtel de Ville. Not in an office, but outside, speaking quietly with a man in a powdered wig who rarely leaves the ministry except to deliver refusals. His name escapes you, if you ever knew it. But you remember the posture, upright, always. Not with pride, with discipline. The server approaches him, offers sugar. The man declines. The server nods and retreats. He opens the notebook. The motion is small, but it changes the air in the room. The sound of the paper is slight. But to those listening, truly listening, it may as well be a pistol cocking. He does not write immediately. He observes. He watches the man scribbling verses with too much flair for breakfast. He notices the pamphlet tucked hastily beneath the sugar dish at a nearby table. He clocks every book title visible from where he sits. He records nothing, at least not on paper. His face is unreadable, but you've seen that expression before, on physicians about to deliver bad news, on magistrates awaiting confessions they already believe, and yet, the café continues. It does not freeze entirely. The Prokop has lived through waves of fear, through censors more brutal and less subtle. The chairs remain occupied. The spoons continue to stir. One man even dares a joke, something about taxmen and fig thieves. It draws a chuckle, faint but real. The censor lifts his cup at last, not to drink, to smell. The liquid barely sloshes. He sets it down again and finally writes. One word. You see the movement of his fingers. 3 letters, maybe 4. He does not underline it. Does not pause. Turns the page. Begins a new line. No one speaks to him. The pamphleteer you saw last week does not come today, nor does the former colonel who always sits near the fireplace. The Prokop shrinks slightly in their absence, though the chairs remain in place. It is a subtle lesson. Absence as signal. You sip your coffee more slowly. The taste is sharper this morning, or perhaps your tongue is just more cautious. Time passes differently now. A single hour stretches across the ceiling like a crack. Then, just before noon, the man closes his notebook. He does not look at anyone. He rises, leaves 2 coins, and walks out. The door clicks behind him, light as a closing drawer. No one speaks for a full minute. Then, carefully, the café exhales. The students resume their argument, quietly, with more qualifiers. The woman with the blue scarf does not return, but a man in her usual seat begins to read. A letter changes hands between 2 friends near the stairwell. The morning begins again, but not as it was. A shadow has passed through. Not a storm, a scan. And though he is gone, the silence he brought remains in the corners of the café like smoke that refuses to lift. Not every idea is born beneath candlelight and waxed bookshelves. Some are dragged into the world with muddy boots and loud voices, in places where smoke clings to the ceiling beams and the floor sticks faintly underfoot. That's where you find yourself now, on the other side of the Seine, past the gentle curve of the Pont Neuf, beyond the formal fronts of booksellers and engravers, deeper into the undercurrent. The tavern has no name worth remembering. The painted sign above the door is faded, and most call it only Chez Renard, though no one has seen the fox it's named for in decades. You're here not for the coffee. It's poor, bitter, made from reused grounds and stirred with impatience, but for something else, something louder, the city's other voice. Inside it smells of vinegar, old beer, and wet leather. The windows are shuttered, not because of censorship, but because the glass is cracked and the wind too bold. The lighting is crude, 3 hanging lanterns that hiss and flicker from time to time, casting the entire room in uncertain yellows. The tables are scarred, stained, and full. Nearly every seat is taken. There's no careful order here, no symmetrical clusters of chairs, no arranged books or quiet nods. People talk across tables, over shoulders without asking. Plates scrape, dice clatter, boots stomp to emphasize a point. Someone sings softly near the fire, not a melody, more a repeated line that rises and falls like a chant. It is not beautiful, but it is heard. These are not philosophers, not scribes. They are workers, porters, leather stainers, stonemasons, cartwrights. Their faces are lined by the city itself, by rope burns and tool handles and wind. Their hands speak even when their mouths do not. Their speech is faster, sometimes cruder, but no less purposeful, and what you hear now is no less important than what you left behind at the Prokop. A man leans back in his chair and slams his cup down. They say the flour will be taxed again, he growls, and this time not just by the weight, but by the transport. A voice from the next table responds without looking. Of course it will. You think they care how far we carry it? They never carry anything. A woman in a patched red coat cuts in. They carry coin. That's all they carry. Coin from us to them, and prayers in return. Laughter ripples, not joy, recognition. A boy in the corner, young, maybe 14, face pinched and sharp, pours wine with a heavy hand. The liquid sloshes onto the table, but no one minds. Behind him, a man sharpens a small knife on a flat stone, slow, rhythmic, not menacing, just habitual. You sit quietly, but you're noticed. This is not a place to hide. You don't belong, not really. Your boots are too clean, your coat too stiff. But you aren't challenged, not yet. The man nearest to you, a cooper by the smell of tar on his sleeves, glances sideways and grunts. If you're here to talk, he says, talk. If you're here to listen, then do it right. You nod. Listening is easy here. The words are raw, the thinking unfiltered. The complaints are not dressed up in theory. They are built from meat and bone, wages cut, prices raised, hours stretched. One man speaks of his wife's illness, how the doctor asked for coin up front. Another mentions that 2 carts of grain passed through the district last night, but none stopped. A third mutters that the baker's assistant was taken by the guards for suspicious behaviour, which in this part of town can mean anything from stealing to reading. You glance around and see a poster nailed to the far beam, partially torn, the name Necker still visible, though the rest has been blacked out by smoke or spit. Someone has drawn a line across his eyes, below it a crude sketch of a noose. This is not performance, this is readiness. A man at the fire begins telling a story, not a joke, not a memory, but a warning. About the last time a tax was raised too sharply, about a cart overturned in the plaster grave, about men with scarves over their faces who disappeared before the guards arrived. They're not ghosts, he says, they're tired men with strong hands. No one laughs, but no one stops him. The fire crackles, the smell of burning bread drifts from the kitchen, and then something strange. A scrap of paper is passed. It moves like a whisper, folded, creased, thick with handling. It goes from hand to hand, no words spoken. When it reaches your table, you catch a glimpse before passing it on. Not an essay, just a phrase. Combien de jours faut-il pour affamer un roi? How many days does it take to starve a king? The line isn't signed, no seal, no name, but the point is clear. Not everything begins in a cafe with gilded mirrors. Some ideas are forged in rooms like this, where the smoke clings heavier, where the anger is less poetic and the words burn hotter than ink. When you leave, your coat smells of fire and sweat and damp stone. Your ears still ring faintly with voices not trained in rhetoric but shaped by need. And you know, if revolution has a voice, it sounds different here. It is the evening again, not late, not yet. That soft span of time between candlelight and dusk, when the windows catch the last breath of day and draw it into the folds of brocade curtains and polished mirrors. You've crossed the city again, leaving the river behind, its tide lapping quietly against the stone, carrying crumbs of discontent toward the sea. Your coat still smells faintly of the tavern, the firewood, the tallow, the boiled wine. But here, as you step across the threshold of the Hotel Particulier on the Rue Saint-Honoré, the scent is overtaken by beeswax, rosewater, and starch. Madame Geoffrin's salon is not noisy, but it is full. Voices rise like gentle threads, one over another, woven carefully into the evening's tapestry. It is a Thursday, which means philosophers, mathematicians, artists, men of letters, a few foreign envoys, and 1 or 2 carefully chosen aristocrats who have learned not to speak too often. The room itself is long, shaped to contain disagreement without letting it echo. The walls are a soft shade of green, chosen specifically to soothe nerves during difficult debate. You're announced quietly. No applause, of course. Only a brief nod from the hostess herself, who sits slightly off-centre, beneath a portrait of her younger self that bears little resemblance to the sharp-eyed woman in the chair. She does not rise to greet anyone. She does not need to. The room orbits her naturally, gently, like a tide pulled by gravity. You are handed a glass, not wine, a cordial, sweet, perfumed, chilled. A servant you do not recognise gestures toward a seat near the window. It is a low chair, unassuming. You accept it. From here, you can see nearly everyone. To your left, a small group discusses ancient Sparta. The argument has less to do with the Peloponnesian War than with modern citizenship. The man in the centre, grey-wigged and gesturing with a lace handkerchief, makes a case for military training as a foundation of virtue. His opponent, sharper, quicker, counters with a reference to the Persian satrapies and the danger of compulsory allegiance. Neither mentions France. They don't need to. To your right, a woman of middle years, draped in silver-threaded silk, reads a letter aloud. It is unsigned, written in a tight, anxious hand. The topic is justice, or perhaps the failure of it. She does not comment. She reads. When she finishes, she folds the letter and tucks it back into a small clutch, then turns the conversation to something safer. Architecture in Lisbon, and whether symmetry can soothe grief. You sip the cordial. It is too sweet, but elegant, like the conversation around you. There are many kinds of revolution. The one in Madame Geoffrin's salon is spoken softly, in long sentences, in irony, in the careful weaponry of metaphor. When someone disagrees, they do so with the structure of a sonnet, refined, deliberate, and fatal only in its precision. The foreign stranger is here. You didn't expect him, but there he is, near the marble hearth, standing alone, listening to an older man recount a dream about a bridge made of glass. The stranger says nothing. His journal is not out, but his eyes move with the same attention. He seems to note not what is said, but how it is said. When laughter rises, he tilts his head, as if measuring its temperature. The hostess notices your gaze. She speaks, not loudly, just enough. He has been to Berlin, she says. He has dined with princes who think themselves enlightened. He wants to see whether France is merely pretending. You nod, unsure whether agreement is expected. She says no more, turning instead to correct a man who's misquoted D'Alembert. The air in the salon thickens as more arrive. The heat from the candles mixes with perfume and powdered wigs. Conversation rises in pitch. Someone claps once in emphasis. Someone else coughs softly, and three heads turn. Then, a question. Clear, open, unexpected. A young man, no older than 20, pale with ink-stained fingers, asks whether liberty must always be disruptive, whether peace and change can coexist. The room quiets, not with surprise, but with interest. Madame Geoffrin says nothing. She watches. The question is not answered directly. Instead, others respond with counter-questions, historical examples, abstract principles. But the question remains. It hums in the candlelight, it lingers between the syllables, it holds the room together like breath between chords. You do not speak, but you feel it. The same unease that stirred the tavern now hums beneath silk and Latin and silver. The same urgency, dressed differently. Outside, the city continues its evening. Horses pass, a child sings in the courtyard, dishes clatter in a kitchen you'll never see. But inside, the room glows with ideas, some clever, some timid, some dangerous. When the hour grows late, a servant appears with a tray of ink and blank cards. It is a custom, one Madame introduced years ago. Guests are invited to write one idea, anonymously, and place it in a silver bowl by the door. Not a full essay, just a seed. You write yours without thinking. The pen is light, the ink flows quickly. You fold the card and drop it into the bowl as you leave. You do not look back. The rumour arrives first. It always does, thin as thread, unspooled from an unnamed mouth and carried across rooftops, through shop fronts and stairwells, until it reaches the café not as news, but as inevitability. You're seated when it reaches your ears. Late afternoon, one of those grey, airless hours when the light seems to dissolve instead of fade. The whisper, "They've taken him." No name is given. Just a gesture toward the window, a slight tilt of the head in the direction of the Rue des Fossés Saint-Germain. But you know who they mean. The poet. You've seen him in the Procope a dozen times. Always late in the day, usually alone, though sometimes with a woman no one else spoke to. He wore no wig, preferring his dark hair tied loosely at the neck. His coat was frayed. He laughed too often. And when he wrote, usually in the margins of whatever pamphlet he happened to be reading, his hand moved like he was chasing something already halfway gone. He read aloud sometimes, not to the room, never like a performer, but under his breath, just loud enough for the nearest listener to catch the shape of the verse. His words had weight, not from volume, but from the spaces between them. You rise from your seat before you realise you mean to. The door swings outward, and you follow the curve of the street, moving not quickly, but with purpose, past the alley where the butcher's boy throws scraps to the dogs, past the shuttered gallery with the green door that never opens. The poet lived above the bookbinder. 3 steps up, one cracked, a thin blue curtain always half drawn. When you arrive, it's already over. The street is nearly empty. No crowd, no protests, only absence. The kind that makes you certain something happened. The door to the stairwell is still ajar. Inside, you smell ink and something sharper, like scorched cloth. The apartment has been emptied with precision. No mess, no overturned chairs, no violence visible, but it is hollow, the kind of emptiness that's been practiced, the quill left standing in the ink pot, the plate beside the window still holding a crust of bread, a kettle cooling. On the desk, a single page. You approach it slowly, unsure whether to touch, but the door is open. He is gone. Whatever risk once lived here has already been taken. The page holds a poem, unfinished, or maybe exactly finished. I wrote the names in dust, not ink, so they would vanish in the wind. But someone breathed too sharply in the room, and now the table is clean. You read it twice. Then again, there are no signatures. But then, he never signed his pages. He said the words mattered more when they floated free, when no one could be punished but everyone could be moved. Downstairs, the bookbinder does not speak to you. He does not meet your eyes. His hand moves slowly, folding the edge of a new spine, pressing it to the glue, holding it in place until it forgets what it was. By nightfall, the Prokop is quieter than usual. No one mentions him, not directly, but someone speaks of a poet, in another city, in another time. Someone else quotes a line that has no known author. The servers move carefully between the tables, the candles burn lower, someone leaves a sheet of paper under the sugar bowl. Later, when most have gone, a man picks it up, reads it, pockets it. No one speaks, but everyone understands. At first, it's just a delay. The shop stays closed an hour longer than usual. The shutters remain drawn. The bell above the door never rings. People glance as they pass, but no one knocks. Not yet. In this part of the city, delays are part of life. Illness, weather, an unexpected visit from a cousin in Rouen. These things are allowed to stall a morning, especially when the bookseller is known to rise late, preferring the company of ink and silence to the business of early streets. But by midday, the delay becomes something else. The seamstress across the street notices the lack of movement behind the upstairs window. The grocer who delivers cabbage twice a week remarks that the basket tied to the pulley still hangs untouched. The boy who sweeps the steps for coins waits longer than usual, then finally leaves without knocking. By dusk, word has reached the Prokop. You hear it from the printer's apprentice, the same boy who once passed folded messages between men pretending to talk about weather. He enters, quiet as always, but his eyes move too quickly. He leans into a whisper and leaves without sitting. He's gone. The cellar's been cleared. You don't ask if it's true. You walk, quietly, directly. The shop is as he said, shut, locked, empty. The windows are clean, as though wiped down by someone unfamiliar with the practice. The faint mark of a finger remains on the glass. The door bears no seal, no warning. That's the most disturbing part. There is no message. You circle around, down the side alley, to the door behind the butcher's stall, where the deliveries once came. A small brass handle, a rusted lock. No sign of tampering. You reach for it. It turns. Inside, the smell is different. The dry, papery air has vanished. In its place, the scent of damp wood and cold iron. The floorboards creak. You descend the stairwell slowly, one hand on the stone. The wall is colder than it was last week. The cellar is bare. No shelves, no books, no lamp. Even the crates have been taken. Only a faint rectangle of clean stone where the table once stood. The hook on the beam remains. You look up at it for too long, then you turn and leave. The silence follows you out into the street. The bookseller was not well known. He was not quoted in salons. He did not shout in the taverns. He spoke only when needed and never of himself. You do not know if he had a wife, or a past, or a real name. But now he is gone, and his absence sits heavier than any speech. You return to the café, but the seat you usually take feels strange. You move to a different table. No one remarks on it, but a woman at the next bench watches you for a moment too long before looking away. Her cup is full, but untouched. Someone leaves a folded note near the stairwell. The server picks it up without reading and slips it into a coat pocket. Later that night, after most have gone, a conversation begins between two men who have never been seen speaking before. They share a single candle. One produces a map. The other points. A third listens. No names are used. The bookseller's work continues, not loudly, not in his room, but in yours and in theirs. The cellar may be empty, but the words have already travelled. There is a particular hour in Paris that does not belong to the day or the night. It slips between them like a shadow beneath the shutters. Dusk does not arrive with bells or ceremony. It simply collects, in doorways, in coat folds, in the distance between footsteps. You're walking through it now. The Rue de l'Ancienne Comédie is quieter than usual. The fruit stall has already closed. The fishmonger's cart is gone. The boy who hums and sells thread from a basket has disappeared. No one calls out prices. Even the dogs are subdued. A man passes you, pushing a wheelbarrow with nothing in it. He looks straight ahead. His boots are soaked to the ankle, though the rain hasn't fallen in days. You hold your coat closer, not for cold, but for presence. The café is near, but you don't rush. Your mind is still at the edge of the cellar, at the empty rectangle where once there were words. You pass a baker closing up shop. She nods once but does not smile. Her apron is still dusted with flour, but her hands are clean. That detail unsettles you. She hasn't baked anything new today. At the next corner the smell of coffee reaches you. It always does, like memory, even before you see the door. But it smells different now, less like warmth, more like ritual. You imagine it brewing the same way it always has, but tonight it feels more deliberate. There's meaning in the grind, in the water's first boil, in the wait. You step inside. The Prokop is half lit. Fewer candles. The tables glow in fragments. The ones near the windows remain unlit, casting their occupants in silhouette. You see outlines, not faces. The room accepts you with no sound, no greeting. You take a place near the wall, not your usual seat. Someone is already speaking, not loud, just measured. A woman in a deep brown coat, hands folded around a cup. She speaks to no one in particular, perhaps to herself, perhaps to everyone. Her voice is even, calm, but the words come slowly, carefully placed. And if the paper is burned, the words still lived in the eyes that read it. No one responds, but no one moves. You catch the eye of the server. He nods, brings you a cup. No sugar tonight, no spoon. Just the bitter, perfect blackness still steaming. You wrap your hands around it. It is hot, and it stings, but you do not let go. In the back corner, two men you've never seen before are speaking in a language you don't understand. Not quite German, not quite Flemish. Their voices blend into the creak of the floorboards and the slow tap of a spoon somewhere near the bar. They do not raise their voices. They speak with the tempo of planning. You glance toward the fireplace. It is unlit tonight, perhaps by choice, perhaps by caution. The candles flicker low, barely above stubs. The shadows on the wall move like smoke, but slower. One man leans forward and tears a page in half, then again and again. He doesn't burn it, he simply reduces it. The paper falls in uneven squares on the floor like a snowfall that no one wants to acknowledge. A letter is passed near the front, folded twice, thin. It moves from coat to hand to lap to another hand. No one opens it. Not here. But when it disappears into a pocket, the shoulders around it ease slightly, as if something had been completed. Outside, the dusk begins to finish itself. Not into night, but into something quieter. You sip your coffee. It is sharper than usual, astringent. It scrapes the back of your tongue slightly. You finish it anyway. No one speaks of the bookseller. Not openly, but someone mentions a man who once wrote letters for the blind. Someone else recalls a line of verse with no author. A third wonders aloud whether words must be published to be true. A cough, a dropped spoon, a moment of laughter, brief, unplanned, and then gone. The room holds its breath again, not out of fear, but because breath now feels expensive. The candles burn lower. The door opens once, then closes. When you rise to leave, your legs feel heavier than they should. The weight is not fatigue, it's holding. You're holding something that doesn't belong to you entirely, and yet must be carried. On your way out, you see a new sign carved faintly into the doorframe, just at the hinge, where most wouldn't notice it. A single line. No signature. Ils ont pris l'homme, mais pas sa langue. They took the man, but not his voice. You step into the street, and the silence behind you walks with you. The street is narrower here, not crooked, just tight, as though the buildings lean in toward one another with something to hide. Their windows are smaller, many are shuttered. The scent is different too. Less smoke, more ink, more cloth dye, and the faint sourness of bread crust left too long on the sill. You've walked this way before, but only once, and never in full daylight. That was by design. At the corner where Rue de Four breaks into silence, you see it again. The print shop. Its windows are dark, the shutters half latched, a sign hangs above the door, Impressions Royale, still legible in faded gold. No one believes the name anymore. The printer's license expired years ago. What remains is what lies above it. You knock once, then twice, then once again, off rhythm. It's a pattern, not a signal, enough to distinguish you from the ordinary. The door opens a crack. No face appears, just a hand, old and quick, that ushers you in and shuts the door before the light can follow. The shop is still. The press downstairs hasn't run since the morning. The ink trays are clean, too clean, cleared for appearances, but you smell it. That heavy metallic scent that clings to everything. The undercurrent of linseed oil and scorch-type metal, of wood that's been used for more sentences than it was ever meant to carry. You're led up the stairwell. It creaks twice, then quiets. Your guide says nothing. A woman, maybe 50. You only glimpse the corner of her face as she ascends ahead of you. She moves like someone who's always listening over her shoulder. At the top, a door with no knob. She knocks once on the frame, then opens it. Inside is the room. The ceilings are low, the air still. A small stove clicks quietly in the corner, its heat steady but not generous. On the table, 2 ink-stained cloths, a basin of cold water, and a small hand press, barely large enough to print a flyer. You've seen this type before. Portable, collapsible, easy to conceal. The smell of glue and pulp hangs thick in the corners. 3 people sit at the table. You recognise none of them. That is expected. One looks up and gestures to the spare chair. You sit. No names are exchanged. On the table lies a sheaf of pages, folded, weighted at the corners by 2 small stones and the curve of a blunt knife. You can't read the full title, but the phrase "ceux qui souffrent en silence" is visible, to those who suffer in silence. The woman across from you, round-shouldered, eyes sharp, fingers permanently stained at the tips, speaks first. Her voice is plain, not rehearsed, not emotive. She asks if you can carry a parcel, not far, just to a bakery on Rue Saint-Antoine. No mention of the contents. No need. You nod. She slides the parcel forward, wrapped in paper, tied with grey string. Lighter than expected. You do not ask questions, but your eyes return, almost involuntarily, to the sheaf of pages on the table. The second speaker, a man, thin, glasses too large for his face, turns the page slowly. You see a headline, something about dignity and those who have never owned land. The language is careful, not rhetorical, but beneath the words, you feel it, the coiled force of it, not shouting, not begging, just refusing to be silent any longer. The woman sees your interest. She pushes 1 page toward you. You read. It isn't long, 4 paragraphs, no signature, just a small mark at the bottom, a stylized bird, not realistic. Symbolic. Wings open, not flying, waiting. When you finish, you fold the page and hand it back. No words are needed. A third figure who has said nothing until now finally speaks, younger than the others, softer voice. They ask what's being said at the cafes. You answer honestly, carefully. You mention the poet, the censor, the stranger with the journal. You do not dramatize, you simply tell. When you mention the bookseller, the woman nods once, just once. They already knew. Someone across the room begins stacking new paper. Their movements are steady, deliberate. The stack grows. The room does not fill with noise. It fills with purpose. You rise. The parcel is already in your hands. No one follows you out. The door closes behind you without a click. Back on the stairwell, the air is cooler. Outside, the street has not changed. A fishmonger pushes a cart past the shuttered shop. A dog barks from a second-story balcony. A child calls out someone's name. You walk back into the city, carrying the words that have not yet been spoken aloud. You arrive late. Not deliberately, but not unwillingly either. The streets held you longer than expected. The parcel is gone now, delivered quietly to a flour-dusted counter, behind the baker's curtain on Rue Saint-Antoine. No questions asked, no names spoken, just a nod, and a hand that took it with practiced calm. From there, the words will move on, not quickly, but precisely, carried by hands that do not rush, and voices that do not need volume. The city is heavier tonight. The air smells of coal and cabbage, and something fainter beneath it. Ink, perhaps, or the old kind of fear, the kind you don't recognise until it has already left its mark. The gaslight flickers more than usual. At the corner a pair of guards walks with uneven steps. One speaks, the other simply watches. You pass them without turning your head. The Prokop looms ahead, quieter than usual. The lamps above its door are dimmed, one flickers. The window shows little. Most of the candles inside have been snuffed. It looks closed, but it is not. The side door is ajar, just slightly. You press it open, it yields without sound. Inside, the café is hushed, not empty, not dead. Hushed. The kind of hush that invites thought, or complicity. One or two figures linger near the front room, reading or sipping slowly from their cups, but none make eye contact, none speak. The usual seats are unoccupied. Tonight is not about there, it is about back. You move past the kitchen door, where the smell of onions and charred fat clings to the stone, past the stairwell that leads to the cellar. To the small door just beyond the pantry, narrow, framed in dark wood, often mistaken for a broom closet. You knock once, then twice, sharply, then once again. It opens. The room behind it is narrow, low-ceilinged, with walls panelled in dark pine warped from years of heat and spilled wine. The only light comes from a pair of shaded oil lamps. They do not flicker. Their glow is dense, almost syrupy, and it pools across the table at the centre of the room. 7 people are seated there. All are familiar, some from the tavern, others from the salon. One from the house above the print shop. You sit. No greetings, no formalities, only presence. The man nearest to you speaks first. He asks about the parcel. You nod. He doesn't thank you. He simply marks it in a small unbound ledger with a piece of chalk. His hands are ink-stained to the second knuckle. One of his fingers is bandaged. The woman opposite him produces a page. She reads. It is not a speech, not even quite a plan. It is an outline, of roles, of routes, of who knows whom, and who should not know too much. She lists places that are safe, and others that were but are not any longer. A bookseller in the Marais, a midwife in Belleville, a dock worker whose silence can no longer be trusted. The names are not written down. After each one, a pause, to remember or forget. Someone asks about the poet. The man with the ledger closes his eyes. He does not answer. No one pushes. The silence after the question lasts just long enough to be recognised, then fades. A map is produced. It is crude, drawn by hand. It does not show borders or towns. It shows paths, ones not on official records, alleys, rooms above stables, a trapdoor beneath the Théâtre de la Foire, a corridor between 2 houses in Montmartre. Each one marked with a single symbol. Circles for places to speak, crosses for places to leave messages, stars for places to hide. The ink is still drying. You listen. You do not speak. This is not a council. Not quite. There is no leader. Only roles. Someone brings words. Someone prints them. Someone delivers. Someone listens. Someone disappears when necessary. Tonight, the listening belongs to you. Near the end, the oldest man at the table, white-haired, broad-shouldered, hands that tremble slightly as he folds his paper, says something that no one interrupts. The king does not know how to hear, only how to silence. But if enough voices speak at once, he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. It is not a prediction. It is an invitation. One by one they rise. No handshakes, no farewells. Each takes a candle from the crate near the door, lights it from the centre flame, then exits in silence. You wait until the last has left. You remain a moment longer in the stillness, staring at the map. One star, freshly drawn, marks a place near your own street. You rise. The candle is still warm in your hand. You start to see them differently now. Not that they were ever invisible. They have always been there, darting between shutters, racing through crowds with baskets of bread, clutching sticks of chalk or trailing behind wagons with eyes too sharp for their age. But now, as you pass through the early morning streets, you begin to notice them for what they are. Not strays, not distractions, but routes. One girl sits on a stoop with her chin resting on her knees. Her fingers are ink-stained. Not dramatically, just at the tips. She draws something in the dust with the edge of her nail, geometric patterns, a symbol you think you've seen etched near the back gate of the cafe. She looks up as you pass, doesn't speak. Just hold your gaze. You nod. She returns it. Nothing more. But her eyes linger a half-second too long, and you understand. She is waiting. Down another street, a boy carries a bundle of sticks on his back, kindling it seems, until one of them falls and breaks open, revealing a roll of parchment inside. He scoops it up without flinching, without drawing attention, and continues walking, the rhythm unchanged. You watch as he slips into the alley beside the wine cellar, knocks once, and disappears into the shade. There is a system. You hear about it more than you see it, in whispers, in passing, in sudden absences. One child hasn't been seen in days, and someone at the Prokop mutters that she was caught carrying a note sewn into the hem of her apron. No one confirms this. No one names her. But that night, a page of her handwriting appears beneath a saucer in the back corner of the cafe, a simple rhyme, once recited by children in a circle. Now, rearranged, it spells out a name, a location, and a question. You begin to understand that these children are not errand runners. They are messengers of a different order. They are too small to suspect, too fast to catch, too scattered to trace. They carry no ink, no documents, but they carry meaning, folded in gestures, hidden in the arrangements of apples in a cart, coded into chalk marks beneath benches, whistled tunes whose changes in pitch correspond to prearranged sentences. You meet one by accident, or perhaps not. You're walking along the Rue des Ursulines when a boy no older than 10 bumps into your coat. He mutters an apology in a voice too steady to be frightened. When he pulls back, you feel it, something pressed into your hand. You don't look right away, just keep walking. You don't turn, you don't glance back. You reach the fountain, lean against its worn stone, and only then open your palm. It's a piece of cloth, torn from a sleeve maybe, blue, frayed, tied in a knot that unravels to reveal a single sentence, written in graphite, barely legible. The song changes at dusk. That's it. No signature, no date, no place. But you know what it means. You've heard the melody played on a violin outside the Hôtel de Ville. You remember the last time the final note was held longer than usual, just long enough to turn heads. Someone nearby hums. You pause. It's the same tune. You're being watched. No threat, just contact. A girl across the square, barefoot, carrying a basket of apples so perfect they must be waxed, nods once and walks on. You've never spoken. You never will. But now you know she knows the tune, and that you do too. That night the Prokop is quieter than usual, but under each sugar dish lies a coin. Not real, just pressed wax, moulded in the shape of the old 6-sol piece. The wax smells faintly of honey and something else. Soap, maybe. You lift yours, find the bottom carved with 3 dots and a line. You scrape it away and beneath the wax is a number, a street, a time. You'll be there, of course. The boy who delivered the cloth will not be. He'll be somewhere else, climbing a wall, running a shortcut through an archway, waiting for a name to change at the end of a rhyme. These children do not carry revolution in their hands, they carry it in memory, in pattern, in play, and the city doesn't notice, which is exactly why it works. It begins with a whisper in the Prokop, the kind that arrives with no owner and no need for one. A name is spoken, not with reverence, not with fear, but with the soft weight of memory. Delorme. A name that once turned pages, once filled pamphlets with lines too sharp to be published above ground. A name that has not been heard aloud in months. Not since the funeral. Not since the quiet cart rolled from Rue Jacob with its lone coffin. No family, no mourners, only a folded shawl laid atop the wood. Delorme. Philosopher. Archivist of doubt. One who believed the future would speak more clearly if he left it enough to read. No one speaks of what he left behind, until now. You're approached by someone new, a man with a tremor in one hand and a gaze that does not rest. He doesn't sit when he finds you, just leans close, enough that his coat brushes your sleeve. He left something, the man says, a manuscript, hidden, cabinet, 2nd floor. The landlady hasn't touched it yet, but she will. You ask when. Soon, the man says, and then he leaves. You do not finish your coffee. The journey to Rue Jacob is not long, but it feels heavier with each step. The street is narrow, quiet, a place where the wind doesn't turn corners so much as drift and settle. You remember the house, pale green shutters, a door with chipped paint and a rusted knocker in the shape of an open hand. The landlady is out. A note on the door in scratchy penmanship says, "Gone to market. Back by noon." It is nearly noon. You knock anyway. No answer. You try the handle. It turns. The hallway smells of wax and old water. The steps creak in pairs. You reach the second floor and pause. The door to Delorme's old flat is ajar. Inside, dust, stillness. The air has the particular dry bite of neglected rooms. No one has lived here since the funeral. Nothing has moved. And yet it doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused. A teacup still sits on the sill. A chair is turned slightly toward the window. One boot rests by the door, its mate missing. You recognise the wallpaper, thin fleur-de-lis on yellowing linen. You step carefully. The cabinet is where you were told it would be. Tall, narrow, with carved vines along the edge. It is locked, but not cleverly. You find the spare key inside the baseboard, where dust disguises a small notch. The lock clicks open, dry and reluctant. Inside, books, folded papers, wax seals, mostly broken, and near the bottom, bound in rough linen, a stack of pages tied with red twine. You lift it. The weight is not much, but the silence around it deepens. The first page is blank. The second, a title, handwritten, slanted, on silence, its uses and its end. No author listed, but the style is unmistakable. You flip through. The text is dense but readable. Each page builds slowly. He writes of fear, not as enemy, but as climate. He names speech not as act, but as risk. He describes a Paris that has not yet arrived, but is arriving. A passage catches your eye. If a voice cannot rise, it must embed. It must curl inward like a scroll, until the time comes to be unrolled, not read, but released. You understand now why they sent you. This is not philosophy for theory. It is philosophy as primer. Instructions, codes, paths forward for those who speak quietly and carry louder thoughts. You find not just essays, but diagrams, lists of false names, disguised addresses, even entire paragraphs where each word's first letter forms an alternate message. At the back of the manuscript, a sealed page, red wax, no stamp. You hesitate, but you break it. Inside is a single phrase. If you're reading this, then I was not wrong to leave it. You return the pages to their cloth, retie the twine, fold the bundle beneath your coat and leave the room as it was. The chair by the window, the single boot, the stillness. Outside, the street is warmer. The market sounds rise faintly over the rooftops. You do not speak as you walk, but the words you carry hum through you now, like something beginning to wake. It begins with thunder that doesn't sound like thunder, not at first. It starts as a murmur, distant even, more like the rolling of barrels in a distant cellar than the sky announcing itself. But something in the sound bends the ears of the city. Heads turn upward, eyes glance past shutters, boots pause at corners, and somewhere along the spine of Paris, shutters begin to close before the first drop falls. You are on the quay when it reaches you. The manuscript still sits beneath your coat, protected but not forgotten. Its weight no longer feels foreign. It has begun to shape the way you walk. You watch the river shimmer with pre-rain light, its surface taut, grey, almost metallic, the kind of light that looks like breath held too long. The wind rises slowly, not enough to scatter hats, just enough to unsettle certainty. By the time you reach the Pont Neuf, the sky has darkened. The baker's sign swings on its hook. The boy who sells matches under the statue of Henri IV has disappeared. A violinist who had been playing softly on the corner since morning lowers her instrument mid-bar and vanishes without a word. Only the strings echo briefly before being swallowed, and then the storm breaks, not in waves, not in fury, in silence. The first drops hit the stones like coins dropped by a careless hand, then more, then all at once. You run, not far, not panicked, just enough to find shelter. An arch beneath the bridge, damp stone, the smell of moss and rust. You're not alone. 2 men share the shelter. One leans against the wall, water dripping from his tricorn hat. The other smokes a thin, almost extinguished roll of tobacco. They do not acknowledge you, but you feel the presence of awareness, that careful wait when people know what must not be said aloud. Rain falls heavy now. It strikes the Seine in sheets, blurring the banks, turning the boats into shifting outlines. You think of Delorme's words, the voice curling inward, waiting, and the thought returns again as you watch the rain obscure the city. The man with the tobacco finally speaks. He doesn't ask a question. He simply says, "They've started sealing letters again." The other nods slowly. "It's the paper mill in Meudon," the first adds. "Someone there's folding blank sheets before they're sold, just to track who opens them." You glance down at the bundle beneath your coat. Safe. Unfolded. The storm grows louder. One of the men turns and etches something onto the stone wall behind you, with a stick, a circle, a line through it, a cross above. Not a mark of faith. A message. You've seen similar symbols near the tavern, behind the theatre, in chalk. They appear and vanish like tide marks. The language of walls. You memorize it. You will draw it later. The storm continues, and then something stranger happens. A woman runs past, coat lifted over her head, feet bare, soaked. She doesn't stop, but as she passes your shelter, she drops something beneath the arch, a folded sheet of music, one corner torn, the name of the composer erased. She doesn't look back. The man picks it up, not to keep it dry, to read it. It's not a song, or rather, it is, but in its notes is a cipher, the rests, the spacing, the false key signature. He traces it with his finger, then nods once. No explanation, no summary, just a moment of shared understanding. The message has been received. The storm is no longer just weather, it is cover. Movement will follow this rain. By the time the clouds begin to drain themselves empty and the rooftops begin to drip, you step back into the city. The stones are slick. The river smells of clay and smoke. The bridges glisten like polished steel. Across the Seine, you see candles being lit behind shuttered windows. You turn toward home. The manuscript remains untouched beneath your coat, but it feels warmer now, not protected. Ready. The theatre is closed tonight. Officially it's due to repairs, cracked plaster, a damaged pulley, something to do with the weight of the chandelier, but everyone close to the edge of things knows the truth. There is no performance, because tonight the stage is not the place where the story is told. You arrive before the second bell. Not the front entrance, never the front. You circle around to the alley where the delivery carts come, to the old door beneath the crooked drain pipe, the one with a faded red mark shaped like a dagger turned sideways. You knock once, then twice. Then you wait. The door opens just wide enough for a candle to meet your eyes. Then you are inside. The back corridor smells of damp velvet and stale perfume, 1,000 performances embedded in the walls like dust in folds of heavy drapery. You follow the narrow stairwell down, past wardrobes of discarded costumes, past crates of false swords and golden laurel crowns. Every step creaks in protest. Each floorboard feels like a warning not to trust appearances. At the bottom of the stair, a door, barely taller than a child. You duck through. The room beyond is not wide, but it is deep. A vault carved into the rock beneath the stage, older than the theatre itself. It may once have been a wine cellar or a crypt. Now it serves another purpose. The walls are lined with old scripts, ink-stained paper, some real, some planted, some coded. A stage map rests on a barrel, its corners held down by coins and a knife hilt. There are 12 people already seated. You are the 13th. No one speaks your name. No one needs to. At the centre of the room stands a narrow table. Upon it, a single candle, its base melted into a saucer. Around it, papers, ink, and a wooden box, latched, but not locked. Someone opens it. Inside, 6 pamphlets, each hand-folded, each bearing the same symbol on the front. A bird, wings spread, not flying, but bracing. Beneath the symbol, no name, just a title, new since the last meeting. Pour ceux qui ne crient plus, for those who no longer shout. A woman you've seen only once before begins to speak. Her voice is quiet, crisp. She does not read the pamphlet aloud. Instead, She explains how it was written, collated from fragments smuggled out of workhouses, quotations from wall-scribbled testimonies, whispered dictations collected by children in taverns. She speaks of the pain of listening to stories you cannot print in full, but still must carry. Another man, a printer, takes up the next thread. The limitations of ink, the presses that must now be disassembled and moved every 3 nights, the paper shortage, the missing courier, the seized crates near the Porte Saint-Martin. But still, the pages are arriving. Still, the words are spreading. Another voice, young, clear, urgent, offers new routes. A stable outside Montrouge, a market stall where notes can be slipped between layers of cabbage, a ribbon colour worn at a public lecture as signal. Yes, I can carry. Then silence, because the next part cannot be said aloud. You all feel it. This meeting is different, not because it is louder or larger, but because something has shifted. In the tone, in the posture of each body in the circle, in the way the candle flickers not from wind, but from the breath no one is taking. The woman who spoke first opens a folded piece of cloth. Inside, a list, places to dates, not events, plans, real ones, timed ones. You recognise a name on the list, not your own, but one you've heard whispered often near the cellar of the print shop. It is not crossed out. Yet. The candle burns lower. Pages are passed out. You're handed 2. Not to read, to carry. One tucked into your coat lining, one slipped into the hollow spine of a discarded opera script you're told to leave in the back of the bookstall near the Palais Royal. When you stand to leave, the room feels heavier. Not just from the plans, from the presence of history still unborn, from the knowledge that this forgotten, flickering room beneath a stage where actors once pretended to die, this may be where something begins to live. Outside, the rain has stopped, but the streets are damp, and Paris feels full of pages not yet turned. You are already seated when the stranger arrives. It is late afternoon, and the Procope is half full, the light from the high windows fading to that soft golden tarnish that settles over the café like old silk. A bowl of figs sits untouched on a side table. The corner booth is empty for once, and even the usual old dramatist who grumbles through his verses is nowhere to be seen. You are reading, not the manuscript, something lighter, outwardly acceptable, a printed almanac of historical riddles, recently censored, now circulating with deliberate spelling errors to dodge detection. The server brings your cup, raises an eyebrow, you nod once, and he moves on. Then the door opens, not unusually, no bell, just the soft whine of the hinge, too well oiled to be threatening. But the man who steps in does not belong, not because of his face, which is too still, not because of his coat, which is too fine, not even because of the ring on his hand. Heavy, silver, unmistakable. It is because of the silence that follows him. The room stills in small ways, a spoon pauses mid-stir, a conversation leans into its own quiet. Even the fire seems to flicker less. He's not the sort of man who announces himself. He doesn't have to. His presence in a cafe like this one is announcement enough. He wears no livery, but he is from the court. Not a noble, perhaps, not a minister, but something close, a shadow cast by the palace, an echo of Versailles drifting into the part of Paris where thoughts are louder than orders. He chooses the table near the mirror, not the best seat, but the best angle. He can see nearly everyone, you included. Your heart doesn't race, but it waits. He orders nothing. Instead, he opens a book, thin, worn, not aristocratic. A page is already marked. He reads. You watch. Minutes pass. Then, deliberately without glancing up, he reaches into his coat and places a folded square of parchment on the table, just beside his untouched book. The parchment is old, not fragile. Wax sealed. No insignia. The seal is black. He does not touch it again. A child enters. One of the runners. Not one you've seen before. She brushes off her coat, mutters to the server, and makes her way toward the stranger without looking directly at him. He stands, walks past her, and leaves. She takes the parchment, slides into the seat he left behind, waits, then leaves 2 minutes later. It is over before the tea cools. You do not follow. That would be too loud. Instead, you finish your cup. You fold the almanac closed, You rise. Later that night, beneath the theatre's rear arch, the same square of parchment appears. The seal is broken. The contents spread across 3 blank pages. You are handed one to read. It is a letter, a report, but it is written with deliberate ambiguity, as if its author knew it would be read by more than one side. The minds at court remain cautious, but they are no longer convinced that silence equals peace. The salons are quieter than they appear. The names you fear most are not the ones watching you, they are the ones listening from within. There is no signature, but the handwriting is known. It is not one of yours. It is not one of theirs. It is someone in between, a man whose role was once to observe, and who now chooses to relay, not allegiance, but temperature, a reading, a gauge, a hint. The stranger has crossed a line, not with thunder, with presence, and Paris feels it. You walk home with a page in your coat. The rain has not returned, but the air tastes like it might. It begins before dawn, the kind of hour when the city still sleeps with one eye open, when the bakers are kneading, the watchmen are drinking, and the cats own the rooftops. The Seine is pale and slow, more mist than motion. You're not awake for the beginning. No one truly is, but something shifts in the rhythm of morning, and it reaches you not as alarm, but as absence. There is no official announcement, no carriage racing through the streets, just silence, where there should be words. The Rue du Bac is empty, not quiet, empty. The guards who usually post themselves like dull ornaments along the corners of the Royal Censorship Office are gone. The gates are open, swinging slightly. A smell, sharp and low, hovers just above the cobblestones. Not firewood, not tobacco, ash. When you arrive, no one stops you. You aren't alone. A few others hover along the street's edge. Printers, students, an old midwife with her hands tucked deep into her apron. They do not speak to one another, but their silence is expectant. The gates creak. Inside, the courtyard is blackened. The shutters are scorched, the windows cracked. The central door hangs open, its edges charred but intact. Someone, probably in the night, has scrawled words in soot across the stone arch above the entrance. Le silence ne vous protège plus. Silence no longer protects you. You do not need to go inside, but you do. The walls are blistered. Piles of damp paper still smoke faintly in the corners. The smell of ink boiled to ruin clings to every surface. You pass through corridors once crowded with bureaucrats and ledgers, now littered with the soft remains of meaning, burned pages, melted wax, an overturned chair with one leg snapped. One file cabinet remains closed. On its front, a mark. Chalk. Deliberate. Circled twice. Someone spared it. You open it slowly. Inside are pages. Uncatalogued. Not censored. Hidden. Perhaps by someone inside the system who no longer agreed with it. Titles you recognise. Names you've seen whispered into coat linings and pressed into wax seals beneath the tables at the Prokop. Some are printed on rough, pulpy paper, others handwritten in long, elegant strokes. You lift one sheet, careful not to breathe too hard. It is a letter addressed to no one, but you know its voice. What is fear, if not the hope that others will feel it first? Let us then speak not to avoid danger, but to distribute it. You pocket it. Not theft. Retrieval. By the time you return to the street, the gathering has grown, still silent, still scattered. But the message has travelled faster than carriages could carry it. They burned their own walls, or let someone do it for them. That night the Prokop is full, not loud, but full. The fire is not mentioned. But its reflection is visible in the way the eyes move across the room. No one reads from the pamphlets aloud. But a woman lays down a scorched scrap beside her coffee, and turns it just enough for her neighbour to see. It says only this: speak before they learn to listen again. Someone toasts without lifting their cup. Someone else nods. You feel it now, deep in the grain of the table beneath your hand. The balance has shifted, not loudly, but permanently. The office still stands, but the gate will never close again without a creak that sounds like warning. There's a mirror in the back room of the Prokop, oval, silver-backed, framed in cracked walnut. It hangs above the sideboard where spoons are polished and empty glasses are stacked. Most don't notice it. It reflects only a narrow sliver of the room, but it has been there longer than the curtains. Longer than the chairs, some say longer than the cafe itself. You've never looked into it directly. Until now. It's late, though not quite midnight. The crowd has thinned, but a low murmur remains. A philosopher at the corner table whispering his thoughts to an empty wine glass. A man in a clay-streaked coat copying something into a small red notebook. You are seated near the hearth, warm despite the night, and something, habit, boredom, suspicion, draws your eyes upward, to the mirror. What you see first is yourself. What you see second is not. There is a phrase, etched faintly along the bottom of the frame, not carved, scratched, as though done in haste or secrecy or desperation. The letters are crooked, some nearly vanish into the grain, but they are legible now, under the glow of the candlelight above the counter. La pensée ne meurt pas sous le verre. Thought does not die beneath glass. You don't know who wrote it, but you suspect who noticed it. The mirror belonged long ago to a man named Henri J. Bruyère, a minor philosopher remembered by few. He lived above the café for a time, scribbling treatises that were never published, and giving lectures that no one recorded. But in his final years, he stopped writing. He sat in the café and watched, and when he died, his room was found empty except for three things: a broken quill, a locked drawer, and a mirror. This mirror. You stare at it longer now. The surface is not smooth. Its silver has warped with age. Light bends strangely in it. When you move, the reflection lags slightly behind, as if the mirror is not simply reflecting, but interpreting. You see the room again, the curve of the stair, the scar on the wood beside the fireplace where someone dropped a candle years ago, and you see, briefly, a face that isn't yours, not behind you, in the mirror, gone before you can name it, not a ghost, not a trick, just presence. Someone else has stood where you are. Someone else has watched this room from this exact angle, and felt the weight of what could not be said aloud. Later that night, you mention it, casually, to the server. He pauses, then disappears briefly into the back. When he returns, he hands you a folded scrap of paper. No envelope, no wax, just age-stained paper, brittle and curled at the edges. You unfold it, a passage, clearly once part of something longer. To think aloud is a risk. To think in silence is a wound that never bleeds. But to place one's thoughts inside the eyes of another, that is survival disguised as reflection. No name, but it is in the same hand as the text from Delorme's manuscript. Your mind folds around that possibility, that maybe Bruyère never stopped writing. Maybe he simply changed his medium. The mirror becomes something else in your imagination now. Not a looking glass, a vessel, a surface that held thoughts in a time when pages were dangerous. A message passed not through ink, but light. The next evening, when you sit in the same chair, you angle your cup just slightly, so that the liquid reflects the mirror. You watch not yourself, but the image of the room bouncing in layers, and you see it again. Another line, higher up on the frame, only visible in certain light. Ils nous surveillent. Surveillons-les d'abord. They watch us. Let us watch them first. You realise now that the mirror was not meant to reflect beauty or vanity. It was installed to record. Not in image, in gaze. Everyone who sat in that room has seen themselves, and each one has contributed, however briefly, to the silent archive built not on shelves, but in the act of noticing. You rise from your chair, you do not look again. But you know the mirror has already kept the shape of your thought. It begins, as many things do now, with a name spoken only once, not out loud, but written carefully on a piece of cloth, then folded into the lining of a coat handed off in the back room of the Procope. That name, bare, unfamiliar, comes with a list. Not a list of people, a list of places, unnumbered, unmarked on maps, and yet unmistakably drawn from real stones and floorboards, from corners of Paris only those in motion can find. The word safe house is not used, but you know what they are. They do not look alike. One is the loft above a hatmaker's shop, where the ceiling slopes low and the chimney never draws properly. Another lies behind the rear wall of a wine cellar, accessed only by pulling aside a barrel that appears too heavy to move. A third is the attic above a bookbinder's workshop, reachable only by a ladder too brittle for the careless. You begin to travel between them, not openly, not all in one night. There is no pattern. That's the point. You never ask for entry. You are never refused. The first you visit is near the edge of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine. The cobbled street outside smells of pitch and boiled leather. A signal, chalk rubbed across a shutter in the shape of a crescent, is barely visible in the right light. You knock twice, then once, then twice again. The door opens. Inside, candlelight, low and uneven. 3 people. One nods you in, one pours wine, one folds a page in half and hands it to you without a word. It is a map. Not of Paris, but of this Paris. A network of lines that mean nothing to the casual eye, but to you they gleam like a constellation. Star points of safety, linked by threads of movement. Alleys, cellars, catwalks, abandoned passages once used by masons or smugglers. You trace them with your finger. The ink smudges slightly. In another safe house, a hollowed-out room behind a print shop's false shelving, you find not rest, but repetition. 2 women sit cross-legged, copying a single passage by hand again and again, the same 4 paragraphs, each word written slowly, deliberately. The only sound is quill on paper. One of them is left-handed and writes in a slant that curls upward. She does not look at you, but she hands you a page when you pass. We are not fighting to shout louder. We are fighting for the right to speak without permission. You tuck it into your coat. These rooms are not homes. They are breath. Held, exhaled, passed on. In the attic of the bookbinder, a child sleeps on a stack of stitched but unprinted pages. She doesn't wake when you step over her to reach the trapdoor leading to the next stair. A man up there, old, unreadable, asks if you've ever printed in reverse. You nod slowly. He hands you a block of type, 1 word, upside down. Écoutez, listen. He smiles faintly. You take it. By the time you return to the café, the stars have risen. Not that many look up, but you do. You think of the lines on the map, the invisible trails that lace the city like veins through parchment. Every one of those safe houses is quiet now, their candles burning low, their doors watched by people who do not call themselves guards, but simply stay awake a little longer. You understand something new. This is not an army. This is not a rebellion. This is a distribution of presence, of belief, of witness. They are not fortresses. They are lanterns, each one, not shining outward, shining inward. So when the time comes, when the time has to come, the city will already know where to find its light. His name was never printed, though you've seen him a dozen times, not on playbills or broadsides, but in person, on dim stages tucked behind butcher shops, in salons posing as philosophy lectures, in alleys where a crate and a candle serve as curtain and light. He is not young. He is not old. He is simply remembered, because he remembers everything. You see him again one evening, in the 3rd row of the Procope, speaking to no one in particular. His coat is worn at the elbows. He stirs his coffee with a fork. When he finishes, he stands, adjusts his cuffs, and begins to speak. Not loudly, not as a performance, as if remembering aloud. And the law may silence the voice, but not the breath behind it. It is the breath we must teach others to hear. Heads turn subtly, not all at once, but in sequence. You realise he's not quoting something published. Not anymore. These are the words that were meant not to survive, the ones scribbled on confiscated pamphlets, recited in cellars, etched on boards that were then burned. He carries them not in ink, but in breath. Later, behind the café, you find him smoking in the archway, staring at the wet stones. You ask quietly, "How many?" He smiles. 63 pieces, he says, 13 speeches, 9 arguments, 4 full dialogues. He exhales. And fragments, always fragments. You ask how. Repetition, he says, and rhythm. Memory has rhythm and desperation. That helps too. There's silence between you. Then he turns. They can burn every page, he says, not angrily, but they cannot burn the tongue that learned it. That week the safe houses begin to change. No longer just pages, no longer just codes. People begin teaching. Quietly, carefully. Passages are whispered behind walls. Single phrase passed between 2 hands at the market becomes a verse by the time it reaches the Procope. A young man with a stutter learns a speech in full. An old washerwoman recites a banned sermon backwards, then forwards. A child who cannot yet write can repeat 7 paragraphs without pause. Each of them learns not to perform, they learn to carry. The actor becomes less visible. He disappears from the cafe for weeks, but his voice does not. It resurfaces in the inflection of a street vendor's chant, in the cadence of a toast raised at the wrong end of the table, in the lullaby of a nursemaid rocking a stranger's child beneath the frame of a broken window. Some words do not need ink. They need echo. You think often now of Delorme's phrase about curling the voice inward like a scroll, but this is not curling. This is engraving, a library built into breath. The actor returns one night, briefly, to leave a final line scratched into the underside of a table in the back room. You see it only after someone lifts the cloth and turns the light just so. When the time comes, speak, I will be listening. The words are signed with a simple mark, a tongue. Stylized, closed, not yet speaking, but ready. The fountain had always been there. No plaque, no statue. Just a circle of worn stone in a small square near the Rue de l'Arbre Sec, where grocers stacked crates and washerwomen emptied buckets. It wasn't famous, nor beautiful. The water never flowed quite clean, but it was known. More importantly, it was reliable. Each morning a few faces would linger there, not drawing water, just waiting, sitting, watching. 2 knocks on the edge of the basin meant danger. A folded piece of paper left beneath the loose third tile was a route. A message carved in chalk on the underside of the stone bench meant that someone had moved or vanished, or changed names again. It had been a place of quiet passing. And then, one day, it was gone. No warning, no guards, no workers, no sound of demolition. You arrive shortly after dawn. The sky's bruised and clouded, and the square is wet from rain that never really reached the ground. Where the fountain had been is now nothing, just stone, freshly laid, no irregularities, no trace. The bench is still there, but its chalk has been scrubbed. You kneel beside it anyway, press your fingers beneath the stone's lip. Nothing, but the air is wrong. Too clean, too still. The grocers don't look up. The street seller who usually hums beneath the eaves is silent. A child pushes an empty cart across the square and does not look behind her. You find a scrap of cloth stuffed between the cobbles behind the old drain pipe. Torn, dirtied, but unmistakable. A corner of red wax clings to it. The same kind you've seen sealing messages too small to be trusted to paper. On it, faint but legible. They removed the fountain. They could not remove the memory. That night, in the back of the Procope, someone begins to speak. He's older, not a regular, wears gloves indoors, speaks without looking up. He says he was there when they came. A cart. 2 men. No uniforms. No explanation. They worked through the dark. Not roughly. Not loudly. They didn't destroy it. They disassembled it. Stone by stone. Bucket by bucket. They took nothing. Left no imprint. Except in the way the morning air carried something hollow. He tells you. The water pipe had been used. Not for letters. Not for pamphlets. For sound. Whispered messages carried through the dry pipe into the bakery wall 2 streets over. A system someone had learned from an old monastery. Voice without movement, words without travel. Gone now, but not forgotten. And suddenly the city feels different. Not because something is missing, but because something that once held language, however quietly, however unspoken, has been unmade. You return to the square one last time that week. You sit on the bench. You say nothing. But you press your heel against the third tile, the loose one, and it gives, slightly, just enough. You lift it. Beneath is not a message. No ink, no code, just an indentation, the shape of a small cup, an imprint of what used to be, proof that water once gathered there. You do not take it. You close the tile again. You stand and walk away, certain of something. That every vanishing in this city makes more space for what must come next. It happens with no announcement, no trumpet, no bell, no decree nailed to a door, only a pause. A pause long enough to feel strange, to notice that something in the city's breath has stopped, not in fear, not in panic, but in recognition. You are in the street when it begins, standing near the old theatre where the meetings once whispered beneath the floorboards. The sky's a dim wash of cloudless dark. The wind carries neither scent nor warning, just quiet. The letter remains in your coat. Not opened, not read, still wrapped in linen. You have not been told where to take it, but somehow your feet already know. You pass the café. The door is shut. One candle burns in the back. You nod to the server through the window. He does not nod back, but his eyes follow you. Not with suspicion, with understanding. Down the Rue Mazarine, across the narrow bridges. The city is almost too still. No curfew has been declared, and yet no one walks. Even the horses seem to move more slowly, as though unwilling to disturb what is about to begin. You reach a house you've never entered. The shutters are half closed. No mark on the door, no sign of life, but the knob is warm beneath your hand and the hinge gives without sound. Inside, the scent of ink, of damp wood, of something just on the edge of being remembered. A woman sits at a table, not young, not unfamiliar. She gestures to the seat across from her. You sit. She does not ask for the letter. She says simply, "It's time." You place it on the table, still wrapped, still quiet. She does not open it. Instead, she places her hand over it and closes her eyes. Outside, the bells of Saint-Eustache do not ring, but across the city windows begin to open, one by one. Candlelight appears in shutters where only darkness lived before. Not signals, not fireworks. Witnesses. The city at last is watching itself. You walk back slowly. The streets are not empty, but they are silent. Each face you pass carries the same look, one of listening, not waiting for news, not expecting orders, but listening for permission to begin. And the strange thing is, it has already begun. You return home, though you do not remember each step. When you close the door behind you, Paris exhales, and the sound is soft, like paper turning, like a cup being placed on a wooden table, like a word whispered, but not repeated. You sit. You look at your hands. Empty now, but full of what they've carried. And then, without a reason, without instruction, you sleep. Because tonight the city does not need you to act. Only to dream, just for now. Thank you for listening. If you're still awake, I hope your breath is slower now, your shoulders softer, your thoughts a little quieter. Wherever you are and whenever you're listening, leave a comment with your location and time. I always wonder where these stories end up, and who they're keeping company. Now, close your eyes, let the noise of the day fall away and rest well. You're safe here. Good night.